All right, it's yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. And Brian, you're on Zoom? Can you hear us?
Test, test.
Brian says Mike.
Did you hear him?
Texted.
Oh, he tested?
Oh, he means talking to the mic?
I don't know.
For you guys.
Brian
No, I
Montague,
think there might
probably
be
three others.
check on you.
Brian, can you hear us? Will you tell him we can't see or hear him? We can't see or hear. Yeah, we don't. Bob, how are you? Wait, sorry. That's okay. We have a little bit of technical difficulty, so we're just getting started.
Can you hear me now? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
We can hear you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And, so I think the issue with that really was that, the most common problem is with, the canopy blocking, the canopy of the trees blocking the view of three things. The traffic signs, or cross traffic in the intersection, or pedestrians. So we added that to make that statement a little more clear as to what, to identify what the problem is that we wanted to discuss. So I don't know if anybody has any issue with making a change that makes that more clear. That statement is trying to identify the problem that we've been seeing. And we tried to make it a little more clear. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And 269. So 269 through 272. There was just some confusion there. The parties commented on retaining wall height, and I think we were commenting on the proposed retaining wall height. So I inserted proposed there, and then what would be recommended as optimal height restrictions. Commented that the height restriction currently in place is 8 feet for single retaining walls and 12 feet for terraced ones. However, if the wall is large enough for another property or public right of way, it can be higher than 12 feet. And we had a lot of discussion around that point, and this wasn't really very clear for me to understand. So, I didn't take very good notes on what we exactly determined. I think, so we're in row 270, starting there, commented that the height restriction currently in place is 8 feet for single retaining walls, and put a period there. And then,
Brian, can you put it on 270, please?
parties, and then after the period, parties also discussed the proposed terraced cumulative limit of 12 feet. Which kind of makes it a little more clear that we were discussing the cumulative limit of 12 feet in a terraced retaining walls that create terraces there. And so what we had written down, what we decided, made some changes to that to make it clear. And I can't tell exactly what we decided, but Tyler's got
it in the other.
He's got it in what he typed it into the document.
Okay.
So any issues with that, trying to clear that up, I don't wanna just change everything in the minutes, but I wanted to make it more clear, so at least it was saying what I think we talked about.
Okay. And you've done that with Ty.
I've done that with Ty.
And we'll just get that, we'll see it
Right.
next week. We can all take a look at it.
Right, and there are a couple of other items. Sorry,
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I'm easily confused, and so it was just helpful to go through and make some cleanup. In row 277. They also mentioned that the new rule would make it safer if distance was doubled. So I just added if the horizontal distance was double the vertical distance, which kind of clarifies what we're talking about there.
That the horizontal,
If,
the vertical distance was double the horizontal, is that what?
right, so when we're terracing, we're talking about terracing again.
Mhm.
The horizontal portion, if it's double the height of the wall, then that provides for a greater, stability and
Mhm.
safety in a retaining wall situation. Again, just trying to clarify it so it made a little more sense to me.
That make it understand. And
And
that's one that you would put in with Ty.
yeah,
Ty.
Ty's got that. And, let's see, in, 288 through 291. Again, for additional clarification, we were talking about trying to show that when we have a retaining wall with adjoining properties, between the adjoining properties, the height of the retaining wall is measured from the landscaped, from the ground, ground to
Finished
the
grade.
top, the finished grade. There you go. Thank you.
You bet.
Finished grade to the top of the wall. And that would be on the exposed wall is the wall that we would measure, not the
Yeah. building.
the smaller, shorter wall upside. So we also cleared that up. We made some changes that made that more clear. Then in row 293, we were talking about a setback in the middle of the property. And I just put property line to make that a little more clear that we're talking about the property line. And then in 301, 302, we're talking about, parties discuss retaining walls on slopes where there's a difference between the elevation along the retaining wall, making the wall vary in size, which would require footings to extend along the slope. And what I think we were trying to say with that is that the footings or the base of the wall would need to follow the contour of the ground rather than make it, level all the way across if the ground was not even. And so we added, follow the contour of the slope at that point. And that is all the changes I had in addition to what Shelley had.
What would be good for next time we meet is maybe bring that again, so we can
So
see
we
what
can
we
make
talked
sure that
about
we
point right
covered
to them,
everything, right.
and that we all.
So I think it'd be good for all of us to see it again, to see the finished
Yeah.
minutes again, if that's all right.
Yeah, especially with the additions and so forth. Okay, Shelley, did you have anything?
I just have one question about that last one. I did email Ty just some minor corrections.
Okay.
Now the footings on the retaining wall need to be level, correct? I think I may have misheard.
I kind of have a question on that too, because we didn't change the code to tell people that they have to follow the terrain of the ground. I mean,
No.
that's part of the reason for the retaining wall is to
Right,
create.
No, but what, the subject we were talking about, and we were just discussing retaining walls on slopes, so it's a situation where the slope comes down and we have a retaining wall, right? But then where the retaining wall is, there's also a slope, in the 90-degree, where the retaining wall would be, it wouldn't be level because the ground at that point is not level. Okay, so there may be an elevation change of 5, 6, 7, 8 feet, something like that, where the wall would be. And I had asked are we going to allow them to bring the wall, so the wall itself is level, which would require the wall height to be different at this end than that end, right? I don't know if you remember that discussion. But, and we I kind of drew on the back of a piece of paper that, you could have it so the retaining wall was level and the wall would be tall on this side and shorter on this side. Or you could have a retaining wall that's 4 feet, and then when the elevation changes, you shift up the footing and you have another 4-foot retaining wall, and you shift that up as you go to the higher elevation. That way, the property owner who has agricultural land has a 4-foot fence or wall or barrier for his animals all the way along that elevation that's not level. Does that ring a bell for what we talked about? That I believe is what the subject is that we were trying to discuss. And I think, Scarlett mentioned that we can't say, oh, you can have 12 feet on this side and 4 feet on this side to make the wall level. And that makes sense. And so if we follow the contour as we take the, wall 4 feet at a time, that was one of the options that we discussed, and it wasn't really brought up in this paragraph.
Chair, as I wasn't here, so I'm not gonna comment on the content of that. But just as a clarification, that the minutes are defined a discussion point, but the code will be taking effect as law. So if there is something agreed to, but what that the minutes may talk about, until that gets solidified in law, it is a record, and the minutes are a record of what was discussed, but the actual enforcement of the ordinance or law would be found in the ordinance, not in the minutes.
Correct.
And we're discussing minutes at this point.
Correct, and I'm just saying that the minutes don't capture what we talked about. And that's my point, and
But at that point, again, the minutes are simply a reflection of the discussion.
right,
But we can't get to the point of thinking that that's the authoritative on the law. These are simply the discussion of that. So
Correct.
you're wanting to make sure the discussion is there for the purpose of?
being accurate. Okay, I mean, we talked about some things and the statement in the minutes didn't capture really what we talked about.
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll look at the code. I think when we review the minutes at the next meeting, you bring those notes. And you more than likely you have the drawing that you use, because I remember us talking about it. Brian, do you remember that as well? We talked about how the retaining wall would go. I understand what I'm looking at is, what do we have for the code? What does the code say? And if that's it, and we look at that, and then if our notes, if adding something to the minutes of that discussion would clarify that, that's great, we can do that. But, or we can just make a note that says to reference the code regarding the retaining wall for the specifics, because that's in essence what would be what has to be followed.
Correct.
The only thing required in the minutes are motions.
Yeah.
Everything else is fluff. So you're getting into a weeds of fluff. You can go there, absolutely. I just let you know, the required of the minutes is the motions and then the ordinance. Everything else is a recording and trying to help clarify, that there was discussion or whatever, but to get down to certain pieces of it, and if this were discussed or that were discussed, ultimately, you're welcome to feed those in, but I'm just curious what benefit you're gaining if that hasn't made it to the ordinance, whether it was agreed or not agreed with the planning commission. If it didn't make it to ordinance, the only required items in your minutes are your motions, and which reflect the approval or recommendation of your ordinance. The rest is for context maybe, but won't be part of the ability to interpret that code. That's not where it's gonna be going.
It's part of the public meeting though, and it's, my understanding is we don't have the minutes for the beginning of each item here because the recording didn't work very well. And
That's fair. I know I wasn't here, so I'm just
So-
kind of clarifying. if that's what you're trying to get to is the detail there.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to get to, is that the minutes don't capture, and because there is no recording.
No, there is a recording.
Okay,
We have a backup
Yeah,
recording.
it's not a video recording on YouTube, but we have actual.
We have
audio.
actual
Audio.
Oh, okay,
Audio.
okay, well, then we can go back to the audio and we can clear this up, and that's fine, but the minutes didn't capture what we discussed in a way that I felt was meaningful. Yeah, and to me, the minutes, I mean, if we're gonna have minutes and we're gonna talk about it, it ought to be accurate. So, but I totally understand that it's not code yet. This is just what we talked about.
Yeah.
And I just felt like we should include what we talked about.
Okay. All right. So we're all in agreement. We will take a look at those changes. And if you have something, we could ask Ty that you can listen to the recording or whatever to just verify, or to have, if you don't have it in your notes on the other sheet of what that was. I remember us talking about it, and we did a few drawings, and then everybody was in agreement of what that was. So
Right, we all understood.
no, we didn't agree.
We didn't.
Just
We didn't have
discuss,
that.
as the minutes say, we had a discussion about.
We discussed
Yeah.
different options.
Okay, but we didn't finalize something.
No, we didn't vote on anything. It was just, I mean, it was a study. It was,
Yeah,
it was an item to review stuff that the city council had sent back to us to
Yeah,
get
so
them
to
some
look at it, yeah.
information.
okay,
So, but we did have a discussion, and if we have audio, then that's awesome. And, I'm happy to sit with Tyler and go through it and make sure that we have something that's,
so we're going over that again tonight, Scarlett, because that's our study item number 1. That we're gonna review that,
Mhm.
okay,
Right.
a little bit more,
Yes.
okay,
So it sounds to me like you just need a motion to continue.
right, to
And then
continue the minutes to
Ty
next.
can make what
time.
changes have been suggested,
okay,
and then you can look at them again next week and decide if that's really how you want it to go.
Next
okay,
meeting.
Or next
Next
meeting,
meeting,
sorry.
Yeah.
okay. Well, with that being said, I would entertain a motion that we continue the minutes for our February 28th, 2024 minutes, and we will review those at the next meeting.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we postpone the approval of the minutes until our next meeting, at which time we will have, corrections made and, updated information.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Bob Washburn, a second by Shelley Nazer. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Brian. Okay, let's move on then. We're at the public comments section. So Ty, did we have any comments? Anybody come in or any letters?
I don't think I saw anything last I checked.
Okay. All right. Loretta, how are you? Do you have any comments you'd like to share? If they're in
Just one.
general or some, okay?
Loretta Buckley, Providence. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for the work that you put in. I know that this is a lot and you deal with a lot, and I just want you to know that I wish we could get more people involved in this now, as you know, I've become more involved, but anyway, thank you
Well, thank you very much for that.
for
Yeah,
doing
just,
that. And I've been, following this closely. I have an interest in the discussion with the retaining walls, and I appreciate the fact that you allow us to, tell you what we want and desire, and we all want what's best for our Providence city.
Thank you. Well, and
So-
I would invite you to just share with your neighbors and encourage more people to come. We
I
get it when
do,
there's something
I
they don't
text
like.
and everything, but it's like, pulling teeth or hurting
Yeah.
cats, I don't know. But yeah, and as far as anything else, as I'm following along, cause that one printout was 18 pages on the ADUs, and I haven't had a chance
Yeah,
with being gone today to get through all of it, but
okay,
I'm trying to keep up with you guys.
sounds
Anyway,
great. Thank you very much. Okay. If we didn't have anything else come in, messages, emails, we will go ahead and close the public comment portion of the meeting. We have no public hearings today, we have no legislative action, and we have no administrative action. We will go ahead and move on to our study items. And item number 1 is the amendments regarding the use and construction of retaining walls. The Providence Planning Commission will review and discuss proposed changes to the city code that regulates the use and construction of retaining walls and make any recommendation, changes, or suggestions. And there will be a future public hearing that will be held by the city council. So if we can go into that. Get back out of here. Open our exhibits up. And is this where we stopped at a point, or Scarlett, is there new stuff you want us to review, or are we just gonna
You went through the whole thing,
thing?
yes, and so the changes, if you want to just hit the changes first,
Yeah,
we can do that. It's just however you wanna do it.
well, I would say let's look at that so that because when we went through it, we were pretty clear, and then the changes out based on the discussions and so forth. I think we reviewed that. That's what's been redlined, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, we are gonna start, let's see, go down to our first red line items. Unless anybody on the commission has a question about a specific thing, we'll go about it that way. And the first I see is, well, at line 45, 44, 45, and 46, we just have stuff underlined. We did have one change. Engineered design shall be required. I think that's all good. Then and Scarlett, if you have any comment or anything, you throw
The
your
next
cup
one's
at
on-
me, or,
The next one's on 59.
okay, 59. And this was, oops, okay. So, section, this chapter of areas with hillside or extreme slope lots that may require limited construction exceeds the regular fence combined with retaining walls, height and restrictions. So we direct them to another part for that. Then 62, terrace of retaining walls is permitted when justified by topographic conditions, terracing, combined height. So we took that out, that the combined height
Mhm.
shall not exceed. Okay. For terrace walls, talk about the exposed part. Separation between shall be stabilized. As someone comes in with this, if we have a situation where they're gonna do a fair amount of terracing, who is gonna actually review all of that from the standpoint of a compaction test, or even the type of landscaping that they may put on it, or things like that? Do they have to show those plans? They'll have to
Yes.
bring that all in, and then staff will review it, everybody will take a look at it.
Yes, but
Okay.
then in the end, it's their engineer that stamps
That
and
stamped it in.
says that everything is been built accordingly.
Okay,
And of course,
The
if
inspection report.
they're required to have building permit,
yeah,
then the building inspection reports will go along with it, so.
okay. Thank you. Okay, so we will move along.
Sorry, I do
Yeah.
have a question about that. So we removed the 12-foot height requirement, and we're okay to go through with just no height requirement.
Maximum.
Maximum.
Maximum,
What the discussion was, is if the property had enough depth that you were doing it in lifts, and you needed more room because the property is 300 feet long instead of 150 feet long, then by the time you got all those lifts, each lift might be more, when you add all the lifts together, the combined total of the walls would probably be more than 12 feet high.
Nice.
And so the discussion was that if they have to have 2 times the height of separation, that would be the factor that would restrain how high the walls actually get. All combined.
So as long as they have the space available and the property, that it could be higher.
Now, there is one that still has a limit on it for a combined number of height of terrace walls. But that has to do with whether you need to get a building permit or not. We're telling people, so like if you have walls less than 3 feet, generally you don't need to get a building permit. But if that combined height of those walls, as you terraced them up, exceeds 10 feet, then even though each wall might only be 2.5 feet, we're going to make you get a building permit because the overall terrace and structure that you're holding up ends up to be 10 feet. So there is one with a cap, but it's for a different reason. It's not saying they can't go more. It's just saying if you go this high, you're going to have a building permit.
I got it, okay. I think that
Okay.
sounds good.
Great. Okay,
So can I ask a question, following that?
you need to come to the microphone, please.
But I do want to interrupt the discussion. Loretta Buckley, okay, so I'm following that, Scarlett, with the building permit. How, if they're under 3 feet, then we can go up to a total of 10 feet or like 2.5, like the one graphic that you had, I understand it. The building permit, and not that I'm even contemplating that, but the building permit, how does that process work and the zoning clearance? 'Cause I'm reading in here about the zoning clearance and building permit.
So the way the zoning clearance works, and it doesn't matter whether it's a retaining wall, a basketball court, a commercial building, a residential building, doesn't matter what it is. The county, since we contract with the county, they don't feel like they're prepared to look at everybody's zoning code and determine whether or not the placement of that structure meets the zoning ordinance for the individual cities. So the cities that contract with the county have to do their own zoning review. So that's what we call the zoning clearance. And we have to do our own zoning review. Then once we get done with that and we sign the paper that says we've done a zoning review and this is good to go, and we have the plan attached that we looked at so that the county knows which plan we approved, then that the applicant can take the zoning clearance and the plan and go to the county to apply for the building permit. So that if we had our own building, our own in-house building department, all of that would be combined. But
Right.
since we don't, we do the zoning part and then the county does the actual building and the building permitting and inspecting. And then, when whatever the structure is finished and the county's ready to give like a C of O or a certificate of completion or whatever they deem necessary, before they do that very final thing, we go back and do a zoning, public works clearance to make sure that it still really did meet all of the zoning requirements and everything, so.
Well, and they won't accept your building permit application if you don't have your zoning certificate.
Yeah.
To make
Okay.
sure that all of that is done, so.
And so if they're under 3 feet, though, we don't need a zoning clearance, right?
Unless the combined height is more than 10 feet, and then you're going to.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's good, thank you for that clarification.
Hey,
On this same subject here, where we struck out the 12-foot height area. I don't see where we said, and maybe it says someplace else that it needs the terracing or in lifts needs to be, the horizontal needs to be double the height.
That's another place.
yeah,
Is that just on the one, the graphic? Is there a graphic?
Line 26.
Oh, so is that on page 2 of 5 here, where it says the height less than or greater? All I'm seeing is that we all have talked about this. The ultimate cumulative lift not having a number as far as how high it can be, but it's restricted by doubling the height of the wall in the horizontal area. And I don't see that in this section right here. And I just want to make sure that we have it someplace.
Is
I
that what's
think
on
it's the
27?
illustration. Yeah, 27, 28, and then it's height greater than or equal to 2 times the vertical.
So,
I guess it's 2V.
so that, but this triggers a need for engineering. Is that true? Yeah, on page 2 of 5, is that where you are, Shelley?
Yeah, line 27,
Right.
it says building permit
Or building
I
permit?
actually think I
required.
inadvertently left out a letter. Because I'm quite sure we had it in there at
Yeah,
one
me
point
too.
that the retaining wall had to be, the height, the horizontal had to be 2 times.
Right.
So I'll put that sentence back. I'll go back and look at a previous version and see where that went, and I'll put that back in there.
Okay, yeah, I think that's what made it possible to go above 12 feet in my mind. It makes it safe to do that.
Oh, no, let's see. Is that not it? 27? With horizontal distance between the 2 walls less than 2 times the height of the taller wall.
Okay, so this section, if you go to the page before that, is building permit exceptions, except as otherwise provided. So building permits required unless, and then this says if a building permit's not required, if you have a horizontal less than
Thank you.
or greater than or equal to 2 times the vertical. But if you have it less than 2 times the vertical, then a building permit is required. So we're talking about building permits there, not
Not the engineering.
well, the building permit kind of requires the engineering, right?
So I think the best place to put it would be on D.
Yeah.
And then down where it says terracing of retaining walls is permitted or justified by topographic conditions. And then we can say the, horizontal width must be 2 times the vertical height of the retaining wall.
For terracing,
For terracing.
right?
We can put it there.
Oh, I would emphasize on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody all right with that?
Yeah.
Brian, you okay with that?
I am, yes.
Okay, I'll get that in there
Okay,
before it goes to council.
Okay, and I think we're now on the 66 where stabilized is added.
yeah, walls shall be stabilized. Okay, anybody have any issues with anything in there?
67 through 70? No.
Yeah. Okay, we will move down to 75 through 81.
No issues there. That's what we talked about.
And that, where we say joint ownership of the wall, must agree in writing Do we have in there that it'll be recorded? Must have a written agreement recorded
Yes.
against each other. There we go. Yeah,
And I called and talked to the county about that to make sure that we could do that.
right.
And I also called and talked to them about making sure that we can, that they will accept the final inspection and the engineered drawings
Right.
that, and they can record that too, as long as page one is in order to record a document, you have to meet certain criteria as to spacing on the top right-hand corner of the first page. So as long as everything meets
Right.
their criteria, what we put after it can, we can have that
Can be
recorded along
recorded.
with it. So
Perfect.
both of those, I did check with the county and we can, have them record both of those things, the agreements and the easements.
Okay. And the engineering.
Mhm.
Perfect. Okay. All right. We will move along. Looks like our next one is 110. Walls have a facing and lateral tieback system, block walls.
Yeah, that was just to clarify what a segmented block wall was.
Okay. And we'll keep moving along. Down to 156. An inspection frequency schedule. The design engineer's knowledge of the site is suitable. And inspection frequency schedule during construction of the wall. Are we saying that they will submit that?
Yeah.
As a part of their plan?
They submit the schedule and then in G, they do a final report saying that they verified that all those inspections were made and it was built the way it was
Right.
designed.
And they have to sign off on that.
They sign off on that and that will be recorded as well.
Perfect. All right. Well, that wasn't as painful as the first time.
No.
Great job, Scarlett. Yes, Loretta?
I'm sorry, I missed that one line.
Loretta Buckley, Providence. Back to line 59. I noticed this, and sorry, I didn't catch it before, and I should have said this instead of interrupting so much. It says C section 5410. It really should be 1054
No,
of your code. I'm reading in the code online, hazardous slope area.
no, there's actually a section in the fence ordinance,
Oh,
which is 5410, that talks about in hillside or extreme slope lots that allows fencing and combined
Oh,
fence
okay.
and retaining walls to be higher than the typical 8 feet.
Right.
So, yes, there's,
so 54, okay, because when I'm looking at our code online, section 5 is under title 5. Am I in the wrong title? Should it be under title 10 zoning?
no, Title 5.
It's police regulations. Oh, okay.
That's what, I know, it's got a
Yeah,
weird,
that's a great place for this.
Sorry,
that's,
I'm just like, this is zoning. Okay, thank you. I was just, cause it had hazardous slope in there too, under 10.
yeah, it does under 10, but this is talking specifically about combining fences and retaining walls and their combined height and it's called special cases. And it talks about single-family residential lots. Some hillside or extreme slope lots may require limited construction of additions to and exceeding the regular fence height restrictions. And so it talks about combining them with a retaining wall and that they can go, they may taper up to a maximum of 16 feet of a downhill fence. So it increases the ability to go up to 16 feet high. A combined total of retaining wall and fence.
And, oh, thank you for clarifying that, cause I was looking at location, height and separation, and so I was thinking it was all on the retaining wall. Thank you.
There is one part in here that I don't think we came to a total agreement on.
Okay.
And I just wanna know for sure, cause I don't think I put it in there. On a driveway, if somebody has a retaining wall and that retaining wall is 8 feet high, well, let's say that even so, it's a 10 foot high retaining wall and they're out of the setback, so they can make that wall
Mhm.
as high as they structurally need to. Can we allow them to put like a 4 foot barrier fence? Cause I would think for safety purposes,
Yeah.
we would want that.
You don't want to drive off.
But I don't think that I don't think we ever, I think we kind of bounced the idea, but I think we got off on another thing and never, and I apologize if we
Yeah.
did, but in my notes, I didn't say
Yeah.
that we made a decision on
No,
that.
I brought that up, that I'd like us to require it. I mean, for safety purposes, it seems like if you've got an 8 foot, 10 foot retaining wall, you need some kind of a barrier to keep children, animals away, and that was in the minutes, but I don't think that I didn't see that in here either.
Okay,
And are we basing that on the height of the wall? Or can they are we saying they can put a fence on top of the retaining wall? A barrier,
I think
depending on height?
they can put a
Any
fence on
height?
top, so like, if we follow the building code, I'm pretty sure it's 30 inches, anything higher than 30 inches, they want a barrier, so that, or a little fence or something.
Right.
So if we follow that, so that, the only
Yeah.
time you get into a problem is once you get to like 6 feet high, then you're exceeding the height of the fence. If you put a 3 foot fence on top of a 6 foot high wall, now you're at 9 feet of combined height. So then you're exceeding the fence height.
Okay,
And so my question is, do you want to recommend that they can exceed the fence height by putting a safety fence, a safety barrier along the top of a retaining wall that's in it, that exceeds 6 feet in height?
so 6 feet? We want to set that as the minimum is what you're thinking?
Well, let's see, if you have to have, I can't remember what the height of
Yeah,
the fence is. So I guess whatever, I'll get a hold of the building department and find out.
yeah,
If you, I know it starts at 30 inches. If you're
Right.
above
about
30 inches, you've gotta have that barrier.
Yeah,
I just don't know what the height of that railing has to be. I was kind of thinking it was 3 feet, but I
Yeah.
don't know.
I think you're right, because we ran into that when we're doing decks or things like that.
So then
If we're
if
over
it's
this
3
height.
feet,
Yeah,
then that would be a 5 foot, anything higher than 5 feet. If you would have, we would allow them to have a 3 foot barrier
Yeah.
on top.
I'd almost think we wanted it at a minimum of 4 feet, but maybe we have to see what the building inspector said, because use that one house up on the hill, the example of that. 3 feet for kids, if guys were playing basketball there or something, and somebody goes up against that, 3 feet's not gonna keep them in. But I'm curious.
I think, aren't you saying the 3 feet is, or the 30 inches is if the wall or the
The
thing
drop
you
off
can
of
follow
the
up
wall.
of is
Right.
30 inches, then you need something.
You need some
You're
barrier.
not saying it can only be 30 inches high.
No, but there's a minimum that they have that you would put, it's like railing on a deck.
Yeah,
If it's over 30 inches in height, you have to have railing around it. And it's been a while since we've done one, but I thought
I
it
can't
could be
remember.
36, 42. There's some set height.
Yeah.
So we probably just need to verify and do that. Because that's a real issue, especially when you have a wall that, even if it's 8 foot, something like that.
Or if you've
For
got
somebody
dirt
small.
going right up to the top of the wall, then dog
Yeah,
or
depending on
kid
what-
can
yeah.
walk right off that
Yeah.
edge. So I think that what Scarlett's suggesting is that we provide an exception to the limit on the size of a fence. Because if you put a fence on top of the wall, then you have to add the height of the wall plus the fence. And
mhm.
then it goes beyond the height that you're allowed to have a fence. And I think for a safety fence, which would be required,
For a safety railing on
safety railing,
the top of a
retaining wall.
retaining wall.
or anything. I mean, whether it's a deck or whatever,
Yeah, in the building codes
that
for
it is an
the,
exception,
that
that's,
stuff, it's all in there and explained.
Yeah, I'll find
This
that
would be
out.
really just for the retaining wall issue.
right.
Okay.
Fronts, yeah.
Yeah. Because, yeah, if you go any other building, anything, all of that, building code has that set, whatever that number is, 36 or 42
That's
is a
my
minimum
only
height
question.
of it, yeah.
Yes, and I think that's, we do need that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So that sounds great. Was there anything else that you,
No, that-
suggestions or ideas? Okay. Well, I think, Brian, any suggestions or ideas, anything we might not have covered as we reviewed this?
No, I think it's covered well.
Yeah, I think you did a great job, Scarlett, getting all of that together and all the discussion that we had about them.
Thank you.
And so what we would do at this point, we're making, with
Oh.
those, go ahead.
Bob suggested one other thing. On the
Right.
chart, he suggested numbering.
Oh, no, that's on the other one, not this
Thank
one,
you.
Oh, that's on the other one. Never
Yeah.
mind then. Okay,
not there yet.
Okay,
sorry.
so we would make a motion to accept the code that we have, recommendations,
You're making a motion to recommend
This
recommend
is-
this to the
code
city council.
with the additions in tonight's meeting or something like that.
Yeah, this is what the city council sent back to us to review and give them
Right.
suggestions, right?
Yeah. And so it'll go back to them for them to
And they'll
legislate.
hold a public hearing on it and then we'll make a decision.
So with that, I would entertain a motion for, us to move forward with this.
I can make a motion.
Okay,
I motion that we recommend to the city council our study item PCC amendments regarding the use of construction of retaining walls with the suggested amendments and corrections and additions with, the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions, set forth in the staff report.
thank you. We have a motion by Shelley Nazer,
Second,
second by Bob Washburn. All in favor?
aye,
Aye.
Okay, aye. So that's unanimous. Okay, excellent, thank you. We will move on to item number 2 in our study items. Let get back here. This is a PCC amendments regarding the use and construction of ADUs, IADUs, and structures. The Providence Planning Commission will review and discuss proposed changes to the city code that regulates the use and construction of ADUs and IADUs and structures and make any recommended changes or suggestions. So with that, let's go in and look to,
And I think you're, when we get done with this, we
Yeah.
would send it to public hearing. We haven't had a public hearing on this one, right?
we
Right.
didn't?
not on the ADUs.
Oh, not on the ADUs, that's correct, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to start to go through in to review the code,
The proposed code.
proposed code, excuse me. We have the following list of definitions. It's not the entirety, okay, so let's start at 132 definitions. Internal accessory, we've eliminated apartment and dwelling, yes.
Michael, would you be okay if I did the staff report on this one?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Because this one, you haven't seen it for a while.
Yeah.
And, kind of so that it can have some history to
Okay,
it. The city looks at the general plan. And, we also look at, the state code, and we look at our city code in, creating this, this proposed amendment. And I think it's important we need to look at the general plan in all of our, codes, but this proposed amendment is actually a result of one of the, steps in our moderate income housing plan. And so our general plan vision is to guide and manage growth in a way that preserves the natural scenery while also providing more opportunities to live, work, oh, I made a spelling error, not shop. Guess we could ship stuff too, but shop and recreate in Providence. The general plan, initiative number 6 wants us to provide housing opportunities, various housing opportunities, encourage housing opportunities to meet the needs of residents of all ages, income level, family size, regardless of their stage of life. It has 2 objectives: to support and utilize existing affordable housing resources and to support fair housing practices through education and awareness. And then in our Providence City General Plan 2020 moderate income housing element, the state code requires the general plan to include a moderate income housing plan. The overall goal, the vision and the intent is planning housing opportunities for all people regardless of income level while maintaining the aesthetic qualities and public service levels Providence City residents currently enjoy. Improve access to housing opportunities for low and moderate income residents, improve fair housing practice, encourage and support provision of affordable housing units. And then we also, it talks a little bit about the history of our moderate income housing plan. And then objective number 5 has 2 strategies: create or allow for and reduce regulations to internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones, and eliminate impact fees for any accessory dwelling unit that is not an internal accessory dwelling unit. We don't charge, we allow homeowners the opportunity to connect to existing services for a detached accessory dwelling unit, as long as those services are suitable to provide the adequate service. So we don't make them enter into something that would require an impact fee right now. However, create or allow for and reduce regulations related to the internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones is actually one of the reasons why we wanted to look at the accessory dwelling unit code and the internal apartment code. And as we were looking, it was brought out, it was suggested by you as a planning commission that we combine everything, all accessory stuff into one chapter, instead of having a chapter for this, a chapter for internal units, a chapter for detached units, a chapter for accessory buildings, a chapter for accessory structures. So that's why it's all combined. But back to meeting our objective in our moderate income housing plan, the specific measures and benchmarks for objective number 5 include, as the city reviews applications for ADUs and IADUs, look for and recommend ways to streamline the process and reduce obstacles. So that's one of the things that the state wants us to be very specific about how we accomplish that particular statement. During discussions with parties interested in detached ADUs, parties have expressed a desire to include an ADU in the construction of a larger accessory building and the ability to put an ADU in front of the primary residence. Now, right now, our code does not allow the ADU to be in front of the primary residence. However, if you've got a home that's sitting 200 or 300 feet back off of the street, to put an ADU on that property at this point is usually limited, because usually you don't have enough of a backyard to accommodate that. But to have 200 or 300 feet and not be able to utilize that for an ADU, when it could be a 1,200 square foot home can be done in a very nice, it's not gonna look like a little cracker box.
Right.
And so, so that's why throughout this, in one of the changes in the code does allow for it to go in the front of the, primary dwelling unit. It also, the way our current code reads now, if I had a building in place, an accessory building, a big detached garage in place before, I can't remember, sometime in 2022. Then I could convert a part of that building into an ADU, as long as the part of the ADU in the building didn't exceed 1,200 square feet. However, if I'm going to build a brand new detached garage or big shop, and I wanna have the shop in one half and an ADU in the other half, I cannot do that. Under new construction, we're limited to the ADU being a standalone at 1,200 square feet. So this proposal allows an ADU to be part of a new detached building, as long as the ADU itself still maintains that no more than 1,200 square feet integrity. So those are the two main things we got out of discussions with people that came in and wanted to put ADUs on their property and didn't feel like they could. There's quite a few people actually waiting for this that have been watching it for the last several months. So those are the things that we're trying to meet as far as meeting our objective in our moderate income housing plan. This code also clarifies and makes changes based on ADU conversations, it also amends Providence City Code 1032 definitions by clarifying and adding definitions, and it amends Providence City Code 1081 area regulations by amending and clarifying the chart and the footnotes. It amends Providence City Code 1083 setbacks, adds graphics, incorporates proposed changes to retaining wall section, and clarifies side yard regulations. And it amends Providence City Code 1084 by clarifying the maximum height of ADU, adds a graphic, and it combines chapter 1012, accessory apartment units, chapter 1013, accessory dwelling units, and adds a section for accessory buildings and structures. And then it will repeal chapter 13, accessory dwelling units. So that's all of the stuff that this code proposal is going to do. So, and like I said, we go with the findings of facts, our conclusions. You are the recommending body. The city council is the body that will ultimately make the decision. You're the recommending body. And then, you also, one of the conditions is that you will hold a public hearing prior to making a recommendation. So now,
We're gonna
that's the
review it.
background
right.
for all of this, and now you can go through. This has been through it's been through a couple of discussions with the planning commission as a whole, and then it's been through discussions with Bob and Brian and Ryan and myself. And these are the results of those discussions. Other than when I went through the charts, I realized that at one point when we updated these charts, we didn't change our code references. And so I had to go back through. So even though some of this stuff is not necessarily related to ADUs or accessory buildings, it needed to be done because the chart didn't make sense the way it was written. So some of this in the setbacks is a result of trying to clear up and clarify previous changes that didn't get put through.
Okay.
So, anyway, the discussion points are actually highlighted. And that's where you'll see, as you go through the recommendations, you'll see a highlighted area that will say discussion. And
Right.
that's,
Right. Okay.
Can I make just a quick comment here? Thanks Scarlett, for doing this. I think it looks really good. And, I want to thank Brian too for taking so much time, to go through this. We were assigned to kind of go offline and just put our heads together and try and sort out some of these things and then have meetings, review meetings with Scarlett and Ryan. And So there's been a lot of work in the background to get this ready for you, but some of the areas where it's discussion points or areas where we need to have some discussion, make sure that we're all in agreement about what we want to do. And sometimes we have a recommendation, sometimes we couldn't come to a recommendation. So we need to make sure we discuss those points.
Okay, sounds really good.
Brian, I don't know if you have any comments about the process.
Just briefly that I agree with what Bob said. There is the idea is we would go through the concepts and the principles involved. And when we thought that the commission would agree on it flat out, then we just left that alone. We made the changes and that's what's in black. The lines, maybe not the first line there in PCC 132, but the rest of them, the question would come up and we would discuss it. And then if we didn't see eye to eye on it, we knew that it needed more discussion in front of the whole commission. So that's the assumption we made on the black versus the red wording in the document.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
What I would like to do as we get started, if everybody's all right with that, Bob, because of all the amount of work that you've done in it, would you mind leading the discussion that we
Sure.
have through this?
Yeah.
That'll let me focus more on just understanding and clarifying.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if let me just pull this up because I printed this out. It was too big to staple and I think I got my pages mixed up.
Let me
Let me
make a
just-
couple of comments then. I can go through the first section.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
good, thanks.
Okay, the definitions are very, very important. We found that as we started, but also as we went through the rest of the ordinance. These definitions are extremely important because it can get confusing. An accessory building is a building that doesn't have anybody dwelling in the building. But requires a building permit. An accessory building small is of no concern to the city and it's less than 200 square feet. That's accessory building, an accessory building small. Accessory dwelling unit, ADU, we're going to talk about those a lot, is different. Accessory dwelling means that there's got living space in it. That means it's got to have a building permit, or it's got to have a building permit. It's got to be safe. It's got to have, running water and all of the comforts that require it. Internal accessory dwelling unit. And I'm trying to see where that is here.
It's the top one, Brian. I don't know
So
why.
first,
I see. So you've combined all of the departments and everything else. So the internal accessory dwelling unit, and it's really important that one, in my mind, or at least my discussion or presentation, comes last, because it is an accessory, internal accessory dwelling unit. That is living space that is separate inside of the primary residence. Inside of the residence is on the building. It is not an accessory dwelling in the regard that an accessory dwelling is so you need to get those 4 different buildings in your mind. Internal accessory dwelling unit, IADU, accessory dwelling unit, ADU. Both of those are living. Somebody's living in them or could live in them. Accessory building, non-living, and then accessory building small. If it meets those criteria, then there's a little or no interest in it at all by the ordinance. I wanted to make sure that it was clear before we started. There, as we went through it, it became obvious that we need to watch how we use those terms, because that's what the code is all about. That's what the ordinance is all about. I think at this point we need to, if we're done talking about the definitions, that we need to skip 10.8.1 and 10.8, yeah, all of 10.8.1, and bring that in last. Would you agree with me on that, Bob? That we need to bring,
Well,
that should come in last because there's a lot more definitions that'll come up in the actual ordinance. That'll
yes,
clarify
I think,
clarify that.
in the definitions, there's one other thing that you didn't mention, and that's, the act of renting or leasing that space is what makes it into an IADU or ADU. Not just the fact that it's,
Well,
space.
yeah.
From my standpoint, if I've got a basement that meets all those requirements, it's not an IADU unless I rent it. And so I don't need to do some of these things unless I intend to do that. But once I intend to do that, then I need to follow the guidelines for internal auxiliary dwelling unit.
So you wouldn't have an internal accessory dwelling unit. If you have your basement converted, it has a kitchen, it's got all that stuff. If you're not renting it to someone or family, it's not an internal ADU?
In theory, you could have a basement that has bedrooms in it and has a game room or something like that,
Yeah,
and a second kitchen.
right,
And if you're just
Bathroom and
using it
everything
all
else.
together as your house,
yeah,
and it doesn't, it just all functions, everybody, your kids sleep downstairs, everybody sleeps downstairs, and
yeah,
the family or the main living room and all that is upstairs or something, then just because you have a second kitchen unit or bathrooms downstairs and that doesn't mean that it's necessarily an internal dwelling unit.
right.
But once you start separating it and start renting it out, then that's what would trigger the internal dwelling unit to happen.
And with that, it would then in essence require someone to get a business license? They
We
would be
haven't
a
got to that
landlord?
point yet.
Okay.
If we get through this,
Yes,
then
and
that's,
you'll look at that.
I should
Okay.
say, if, when we get through this,
Yes.
that code is actually drafted, that business license
Yeah.
code. But, the state did make some changes on what we can require for business licenses in this most recent legislative session, so I'm gonna have to make sure that what
Sure,
we've drafted will match. But that's the thought,
okay,
and they would also have to record, a document,
Restriction,
yeah.
title restriction, is that what it is?
Mhm.
That's correct. That's a big point in this whole document.
is that farther down in the code?
Yeah,
somewhere?
it's
Yes,
later.
yes, major discussion on that.
Now, that would be, a reason to make sure that we understand the definition of what these are and what they're not.
Okay, sounds good to
Okay.
me so far.
So, next, let me,
Before you move off of that, I think it's important, we added two definitions. Accessory farm building, because we talk about accessory farm building, we had it in our use chart. But an accessory farm building does have a definition in state code, and so, it's solely in conjunction with an agricultural use and not for human occupancy. So that's important, because the way our code reads, you have to have a primary structure before you can
Right.
have an accessory structure. In the agricultural world, it's not a primary structure, it's a primary use. The primary use is raising your horses or raising your hay
Yeah.
or whatever, and the accessory farm building is accessory to
that.
that use. Therefore, you wouldn't have to necessarily, if you had a big 20-acre piece of property that got green belt and stuff on, you wouldn't necessarily have to build a house on it, so you could build a barn, because the barn would be accessory to the use, so we had to distinguish that. And then the other one, we had a lot of people asking, it's been confusing because we haven't really had anything that addressed swimming pools and gazebos and stuff like that, because they're not like a detached garage and things like that. So as I was looking through other communities to see what they did, they used the term accessory structure. And
Okay.
so we've added accessory structures. So they don't provide shelter from the elements. They may include unenclosed or uncovered swimming pools, pool screening, decking, waterfalls, fountains, barbecue, waterfalls, fountains, and barbecue pits with concrete foundations. Now, you can have your little portable barbecue
Right.
pit or your portable fountain, and that doesn't count. We don't worry about those portable things. These are the things that you're going to actually
Permanent
put in a
structure.
pretty permanent place on your property. Decorative ponds, detached decks, or unenclosed and uncovered sports courts. So structures is it's important to keep that in your mind as we go through this too.
Okay,
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, so, Brian, did you say that, 10-8-1, the area regulations, we didn't really have any issues with, right?
Well,
So
there's plenty of red in there, but I think it ought to go last, as we discussed.
Why you look at that last? Okay,
Yes, just like we did when we discussed it.
when we,
We placed it at the end of the discussion. A lot of the definition takes place in the ordinance and then 10.8.1 refers to the ordinance, in many cases.
okay, yeah, I agree. It was, it's good to get all the other stuff digested before we get to that.
So
So-
is it possible, just on that note, where it makes more sense for us even going through it, that it may make more sense to the public to put it at the end of the code? The reference chart?
It's in a numerical order. And the numerical order is 10.8.1. I'm sorry.
Right, I'm just suggesting that
And-
maybe
and
we
so-
change the number. Is that something that might be helpful?
Once you understand it, most people are gonna go to that chart first.
Okay,
And that will be their
Yeah.
go-to to look at. Then if they want more behind it, they go look at the rest of the stuff. I think though, I agree totally with Brian's suggestion about talking about the chapters that kind of have the meat and potatoes. Because if change any of that wording, then it's easier to go back and change the chart than to go through the chart and say, yeah, we're good with this, and then we get through the wording and we're not good with the wording, so then we have to come back and change the chart. So I think waiting to do the chart till last is a good idea.
Okay, so given that, if we go to 10-8-3 setbacks,
sorry, one more note. Where's 10-8-2?
it's the second,
I really don't even see it.
you've got,
There's one.
you've got a matrix for area regulations, 10-8-1,
Uh-huh.
and then an almost blank page. And then we're at 10-8-1, regulations, these are for single family. The others are multifamily. And then.
We're not changing anything in 10-8-2.
Okay, so it's not,
10-8-2, sorry.
okay,
I was thinking that second,
Yeah,
um,
we've got, the
Box,
charts you've
so-
got are the
ones that are
use
changed,
chart and the area regulations chart is what you've got.
right?
That's
So
the use chart, I think, is in there.
10-8-3 setbacks, there's no on this first page up through, window wells, there's no change to the code.
Well, actually, I should have put it, I thought I did, but I must not have saved it. The chart here, and this is blurry, for some
It
reason,
is.
it wasn't blurry when I created it, but when I copied it into here, it came out blurry. But I'm gonna have Justin do a more appropriate chart, if you like the chart. One of the things is kind of a confusing problem for people is yard and setback. Because when we start talking about accessory buildings or accessory structures, they can take up a certain amount of the yard which includes the setback when you're deciding how the overall yard space. Now, they have their own setback, which is different than the primary structure setback generally. So this chart is trying to show that the green line is the property line. And the dotted bluish line is representative of a setback. The red line represents the yards. So like in the chart on the right, you've got it's not a corner lot, it's an interior lot. So you got a front yard in the front. And then your yard line goes across the front of the house. You draw an arrow across the plane of the front of the house, and that creates the front yard. And then you draw an arrow across the plane of the back house, or the back of the house, and that creates the backyard. And the chunk in the middle of those two lines, that's the side yard. For purposes of fencing and just deciding whether it's a yard or not. Or what part is side, what part is front and what part is rear. On the one on the left, it's a little different because a street side yard actually goes, the rear yard doesn't go all the way over. It stops at the back corner of the house because it's on a street, and the street side is treated differently than an internal side. So on a street side yard, you've got your front yard that extends the length of the street. You've got your street side yard that extends the length of the street. Then you've got your backyard, and then or your rear yard, and then you've got your internal side yard. And that's what we're trying to show people, is that the yard includes the setback. And the setback isn't the yard, because some people, in some cases it is. If you're building setback to setback, then your yard and your setback are the same. But in many cases, the setback is much smaller than the actual yard.
Can I make one small suggestion to the visual?
You can make all kinds of suggestions.
Where it says yard, so front, rear, just adding the word front yard, rear yard, side
Okay.
yard, I think could be just a little more clear.
Good
Okay,
point. Yeah,
Other than that, I think it's a very good graphic.
the only reason why I didn't is because it also could be called the front setback.
That's a good point.
But I can add those.
the yard overlaps the setback,
Yeah,
Yeah, I see that.
so. Okay, so on that page 1 of 5, you don't have numbers. Yes, we do, 1 of 5, so I don't see any changes other than what Shelley mentioned about, putting yard in there, because I think it is helpful to have the yard go beyond into the setback. So that's very clear.
We did have a difference of opinion in this area, in that in the past, the rear yard has been available for accessory buildings of one kind or another. But the side yards or the front yard have not been available for those things. And the ordinance changes that, where the accessory building of one type or another could go in the front, could go inside, could go, and then those areas are also used to compute with as well. And we come to a number here, a percentage of how much of the yard can be used for accessory dwellings. I'm sorry, for accessory buildings of any kind. And so these are different from previous ordinances. We're making a significant change here.
and that's why you felt like we needed a graphic to try and
Yeah.
help people understand all that.
Yeah.
So page 2 of 5, we have a large graphic to kind of illustrate different points. And I did have a suggestion that I talked to Scarlett,
It's
Sorry.
okay.
Scarlett, about earlier today. If we were to number these graphics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, going down the left-hand side, and then link, if if we're talking about, like in B, 3 feet to 6 feet wall, height, retaining wall and height. Retaining walls from 3 to 6 feet in height may be located within the required non-street side or rear setback area in residential zones, and any setback in the non-residential zones, provided the exposed side of the wall faces into the subject parcel. Well, that, you gotta think, well, what does that really mean? But if you point them to number 2, that's what we're talking about. Okay, the second one down, this is talking about when the person with the house on the left is creating a retaining wall, and that exposed retaining wall is facing their house, their property, then you can build within the setback, which is blue.
Right.
Okay, so that helped me to say, okay, that's what we're talking about right there. Okay, so that's one recommendation that I'd like to make there. And a second recommendation that I noticed when I was looking at this is that in number 1 and number 7, the first one and the last one, it shows the footing starting at the edge of the setback, but it's my belief that the footing is buried and could be in the setback. It's the retaining wall that shouldn't be in the setback. And so in those 2 illustrations, I recommend that we show the footing inside the setback, as that would be allowed, because it's still on their property. It's in the setback, but it's not greater than 3 feet tall. It's actually buried. It's underground, so you don't see it anyway. Were there any questions about that? Is that?
I have one comment maybe on the graphic. It might be helpful to add at the top which one the applicant is. So like in the top one, if the applicant is the person on the left, that works. But if the applicant's on the person on the right, that doesn't work. Anyway, I mean, that's an extreme one.
Well, yeah, that doesn't work because
It's
on somebody else's property.
Right.
So where the wall is.
I just think maybe putting at the top, the applicant is the person to the left.
The applicant is the person with the wall on their property. Because in number 3, we have the wall on the property line, and both of them are
Both of
applicants.
them would have to be the applicants.
But yeah, I think that would make sense. The applicant is the person with the wall on the property in the illustration. So it goes back and forth.
I can put a note by the illustration, caveat to this illustration and this part is sitting in city council's hands right now to discuss at their next meeting. Any changes that you recommend in that part tonight, Ty and I'll make sure that, well, Ty's already sent the agenda out for that, haven't you?
No.
Okay, well, then we can make sure that we can include these changes so that they've got the most up-to-date one.
Right.
Great.
Okay,
Or
Mr.
if
Chairman,
they,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to be excused. Hopefully I'll be able to return tonight, but I've got something very important that came up, and I'll try to do my best to get back tonight.
Appreciate it. I remember you telling me that. Thank
Thanks
you,
again for
Brian.
your work on
Thanks,
this,
Brian.
Brian.
You bet. Thank you.
okay. Any more comments about the illustration graphic?
Give me just a minute. I'm just looking at one other thing to make sure I understand it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we didn't have any additional comments, for this page. Brian and I didn't, so I mean, everybody's had this for a week
Yeah,
to review, so did anybody else have comments on this page? Any concerns?
on your page with the graphics.
The page with the graphics, 2 of 5.
No, I'm fine.
I guess
I
just
think
a
this suggestions.
small one, so we just reviewed retaining walls. Is this graphic there also? Or
No.
this graphic is just specific for accessory dwelling unit?
No, this graphic is specific for the zoning placement of the retaining wall.
Okay,
The other ordinance was specific to the construction and the landscaping elements and things like that. This is specific to the zoning placement.
okay,
Right, so this one, we will hold a hearing
Well, you already did. You held the hearing on this one.
on this
on the
portion,
graphic.
on this
Yeah.
portion, okay, the ADUs,
Yeah,
we didn't, right, okay.
Gotcha.
And the comments that we discussed after the hearing are included in this here. So if we go to 3 of 5.
these comments now are new. You will actually hold another hearing on it.
Right,
We'll wait and see what city council does. We'll include these changes that you're talking about on the wall. If the city, on the graphic, if the city council makes changes on the graphic, before, when they approve it, then that will come back and that will look like regular code. It won't have red proposed graphic anymore. It will look like regular code. And then the rest of 10.8.3 and 10.8.4 that you're about to discuss, you will have to hold a public hearing on that. So that, because we did this graphic with retaining walls separately than we did the whole setback thing.
okay.
So we haven't held our hearing, wasn't this whole thing
Not
for
the whole
10.8.4?
No,
Okay. So just up through the graphic, is that's all we've discussed? Oh, because that's when we combined it. We
yes,
combined, okay, got it, okay. So as a complete document, then we're gonna hold another hearing.
yes.
Okay, okay. Any comments along, with the front yard? I mean, I don't think we need to read through everything now unless, I mean,
You're talking about page 3.
I'm talking about page 3 of 5.
So quickly, on numbers, on C3, that red, that used to be in the code. And, at some point in time when we made some code changes, unfortunately, that was inadvertently left out. So the way our code reads at the current time, for non-residential uses, we don't have anything that governs their side yards. So that's why that's coming back in. That's why that's being included in this code, is so we can get that back in there. I realized that when I was trying to go through and make sure all the footnotes were correct on the chart. So this is one of those corrections. When Brian was talking about the changes because of the side yard and the setbacks and all of that type of stuff and the importance of understanding all that, it's this number 6. This is one of the changes that's coming from this. It's that accessory buildings shall maintain a minimum side yard of, these are, a minimum side yard of 25% of the building height or a minimum of 5 feet to the side property if adjacent to a separate property. No less than 20 feet if adjacent to a public street. This is to help with people that come in with 35-foot tall accessory buildings. And instead of them being able to put them now on the 5 feet, it would be, they'd have to move them a bit. And this is patterned after the way we have the multifamily buildings structured to create their side yards. So if it's an accessory building, whether it's a farm building or an accessory building, then it has to maintain a side yard, or not a excess, yeah. It has to maintain a side yard equal to 25% of the building height or a minimum of 5 feet, and not a farm building, just an accessory building has to maintain that. The others can be built to their setbacks, because the ADU is a different setback.
I think that sounds like a great addition.
Yeah,
But that was the point of it, was so people could have those taller buildings.
but still have some yard.
Yep,
And not have them where they're.
and not have the neighbor feel like they're scrunched.
Right.
Okay, so we good to move on to, 4 or 5?
Yes, I don't see anything
I
changing in there.
I didn't see anything that needed to be changed when I read through it either. It covered everything we had talked about. 5 of 5. Got odd shaped lots. Again, no change from what we had discussed before. Then we get to the height. So the maximum height of an accessory dwelling unit may not exceed the height of the existing primary residence. So we don't have a huge a building taller than the primary residence as an accessory dwelling unit.
Excellent addition. I'm surprised that that's not in code already.
I think we have some place that,
The reason why, it kind of was in code already, it said that the maximum height of a primary residence was 35 feet, and the maximum height of accessory dwelling unit was 35 feet. But it didn't address the case that somebody may have a 28-foot home, but to get the 1,200 square feet in their backyard and doing their 2 levels, that may end up being 35 feet. And so then you've got this accessory dwelling unit that meets all of the square footage requirements, but it's higher than the home. So this is going to say the height of the home is the thing that,
Or measure by.
yeah.
Okay.
The only case that wouldn't be is if somebody had a small home on their property right now, 1,200 square foot home, and it was only 20 feet high, and they built a new home that was going to be considered the primary home, then it could be built big. Because the accessory home would be,
Become the existing one.
the
Yeah.
existing home would become the accessory home. And we do
But-
have a couple of people that have planned to do that.
so when in the code, it says that an accessory building can be built at the same time as the primary structure, but not before. So how do we get around that when that happens?
Because it's a primary building the way it is right now.
It's a primary building now, and then
When they
When
build
they
the
make
other
it-
building, it turns it into a
turns it
accessory.
into an accessory building,
Mhm.
okay? And that, we're all good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense to me, it's just, okay. So, then we've got a new graphic here that talks about calculating the final. Oh, this is the height of the house,
Mhm.
Mhm.
so it makes it more clear what we're talking about. Any questions on this 5 of 5?
No,
No.
Okay, we go to 1 of 5 now, which is 10-12, accessory building, dwellings and structures. Defining this, talking about internal accessory dwelling units, which is inside the house, or detached accessory dwelling units. And the definition, let's see.
It just references that the definitions are back in 1.3 that we already
1.3,
talked
so
about.
that's, yeah, so that's, and then we talked about the definitions, so the first one, accessory buildings and structures. Not for living purposes, right? And, accessory building is not a primary dwelling or a detached accessory dwelling unit. Except for, okay, just trying to go through this. I don't have any comments on this, having read it.
Yeah.
The, number 3, A 10-12-2, A3, no accessory building or group of accessory buildings can occupy more than 25% of the lot not covered by the primary dwelling, which is new. So if you've got a big lot, you can have lots of buildings or whatever. But if you've got a smaller lot, then you can only use 25% of the lot that's not occupied by the house. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
does that have any issues? We talked, Brian and I talked a lot about that. Now, the next one here, the general appearance of the residential districts is a discussion point. And then also the distance between principal structures, dwelling structures.
No, not dwelling.
For accessory buildings.
Accessory buildings. So the question had come up, or it was originally written up as we should have basically the same materials and same look and feel architecturally and colors and style for accessory buildings as opposed to having a house, rectangular, and then have a barn, that's shaped like a barn.
Right.
Right, Red.
And so we wanted to discuss that. I know that there have been people approach me to talk about, large accessory buildings, that, just don't fit into a residential neighborhood. But then again, there are others who have a barn that looks good. It looks like a barn, but it's a nice looking barn. And so, it's just, is there anything we want to restrict there? Or put into code that it's,
Is it that we don't have anything right now regards to that? Cause,
We do in the
Yeah.
accessory dwelling unit,
yeah,
but we don't have
Not for the-
anything in the accessory building.
buildings. That's where you have a really nice home, stucco, rock, whatever, stone, and you have a big red barn in the back or, whatever, those kind of things, or a metal building, different colors stuff. And so we haven't regulated it before. I don't know that I don't think it makes sense to say that needs to match the facade of the home. Because that's just adding a lot of cost to it and so forth for the structures.
It kind of depends on, sorry, you
No,
finish.
no,
I'm just thinking it almost depends on the size of the lot or the zoning. Because it's okay to have a big red barn on an agricultural lot with a resident, a larger, but in the middle of a neighborhood, it kind of doesn't work,
well,
right?
you have some homes, some lots that are a good sized lot here in the neighborhood in Providence. I think they're more in the older sections that I've seen them, where you have that bigger building, whether it's a shop or, garage just used for storage, or if it's a barn style, whether they have animals or not, but
And they're typically bigger lots though, right?
yeah, but not that much bigger, maybe they're a third of an acre or something like that, some of those.
It's smaller homes then, in the older historic, I'm thinking that,
That's how it used to
More
be, a
green.
smaller home
yeah.
with a bigger shop garage.
yeah.
But So I think we have that. And the thing is, if it's a structure, because like you say, looking at the definitions of what structures and so forth, it's like if you have a,
Size.
this is accessory buildings, and then you're gonna get into the accessory structures. I don't know.
So,
I do think at times, you know, it's like you go up, there's one house we talked about before. Nice neighborhood, nice homes, with this big red barn, because it could go up to the 35 feet, I think that's what our code was before. So you have this big red barn there, so it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, sort of, but you know. They had the right to do that and everything. What would you, you know? So I don't know.
another point is that we've had a few situations where people own two lots and want to combine them into one lot, and that gives them enough area that they can put a large,
Yeah. Well, and sometimes throw all their toys or things like that, store it all inside.
Scarlett, would this include something like a greenhouse? Is that an accessory building?
Building, or is it a structure?
well, if it's,
No, it's covered and it's enclosed. If it's covered and it's closed, then it's a building.
But on the ground, or does it have to have a concrete pad?
No,
I don't think
that's,
so.
Just that it's covered?
It's covered and keeps
Covered
the
and
elements
Yeah,
out.
elements are out, okay,
then it's a building. If it's not,
yeah,
well, building code wise, it may be considered different, but for our
Yeah.
purposes,
but if it's smaller too, if it would be
Yeah.
under the 200 square feet.
yeah, then it wouldn't.
Yeah, there's a couple of homes that have
Well, just one thing,
greenhouse on the
I
side.
mean, by state code, we cannot regulate exteriors on single-family homes or architecture, things like that. So I'm not saying that we can't do that on accessory buildings. We certainly can if you want to. We can make some general things, but you have to keep in mind, we have castles, we have
Yeah.
domes, we have all kinds of interesting architecture out there that some people may take offense to. Other people may think it's the coolest thing in the world, but we can't regulate any of that when it comes to single family. We can regulate that kind of stuff on multifamily, but we can't regulate it on single family.
Now,
So,
if it
but
has
we-
something in the CCNRs or
Yes,
homeowner groups, those
private-
are where, stuff like that,
We don't regulate that
yeah,
either.
private,
Yeah.
private homeowner groups, they can be more
they can,
restrictive.
yeah,
But we can't. But that's one of the reasons why we put in that change on the side yard setback, that the building had to be half the distance of the height of the building, was so that if somebody did have those big buildings, it wouldn't be sitting right on the 5 foot
Right.
line. It
Right.
would be 15 feet away if it was 30 feet high, or 17 if
Right.
it was 35, so. But architecturally, if you wanna put stuff in for the buildings, I think we can certainly do it for accessory buildings, but we can't blur the line to try to do it for
Right.
houses.
well, what does everybody think? What does the staff think in regards to trying to regulate what accessory buildings look like? Match, or look like, don't look like?
Has anybody else had comments from the public? And you guys either?
I would just say that the way to enforce that is somewhat difficult. The eye of the beholder is different.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My wife can see much greater differences in things than I can. I look and say, oh, that's a house and that's a house, and they look pretty close, and she'll be like, they're even the same. So, and, you know, rightfully, I've heard from the mayor, you know,
Yeah.
from her distinguishing, she can distinguish differently on roof structure and that. And I look at it and think, oh, you know, it's a pitch, it flows, water and distributes the snow. So at that point, you know, anything that is the ability to be arbitrary, capricious, or undefined, if you're going to have that definition, please make it as defined as possible.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to have the discretion necessarily of just whatever and say, oh yeah, well, those look a lot alike because they're both white. Shelley might say, no, one is bone and one is.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Ivory.
Ivory, thank you.
Yes.
And so.
We haven't had public comment on it
Yeah.
because right now we don't deal with it.
Yeah,
So, but one thing to keep in mind, you know, there's a lot of people that use those kit, you know, they bring them in and tough sheds, only,
Right.
there's many different names for them.
She
Yeah.
said,
But, yeah, but, they can be really nice looking little structures, but they may not look at all like the house.
Yeah,
And so if we start doing this, that may impact the ability of some people to utilize a pre-built
yeah,
unit like that.
That's what made
Well-
me think of greenhouse and pavilion, pagoda, whatnot.
and some people will say, you know, it's my backyard, I should be able to put whatever I want in there.
Yeah.
I, like Ryan, and to a degree, I have a bright pink, hot pink, Pepto-Bismol pink playhouse on the side of the house. And that's become a distinctive thing. Where does Michael live? Well, he lives where the pink playhouse is. So, but some people don't like it either, you know, so,
But it's your property rights, and we
Yeah.
need to find that balance.
well,
But you wouldn't want a chicken coop to look like the house necessarily.
I do have a chicken coop. We do have a chicken coop that looks like a house. It's built like a house. Has a pitch roof and everything.
The little library that looks just like the house,
Yeah.
it's so cute.
I personally, right now, it would be interesting to see what the public comment is about that. Because I can also understand the individuals where there was that house, a really nice newer neighborhood with this big red barn, accessory building, you know, tall building, all that kind of stuff, where you could, all the neighbors could see it. Where around them, they all built just these really nice homes, and this individual, wasn't it that he had 2 lots? Or did it, something like that? Yeah, there were 2 lots, because I remember us talking about it. That he could have, you know, that could have been sold, or the people probably anticipated there would be a house on it, things like that. So it'd be interesting to get public comment feedback. I don't think so I can see both sides, but
Yeah, I have had a comment in our neighborhood, or neighborhood adjacent, depending, just a couple blocks away. And it's hard to say whether it's an accessory dwelling unit or an accessory building. But it appears to be larger than the home. And
Oh.
it's metal, it doesn't look
Yeah.
anything like a home, it's just a big, you could
So
call
like
it
a
a
shop.
barn, but yes, a very large
Yeah.
shop. And there have been complaints about it, that, you know, it took away the sun for the neighbors.
has it been there a long time?
Yeah, it's been there a while.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, I mean, sometimes people, you know, we've had this view of the mountains, I mean, we had that over here for the Ballard Springs. I'm not gonna be able to look at the mountains anymore.
"Look at the wells right now."
Yeah, I said, well, wait till you're 55 and then just buy a house over there and just they build a commercial building. But anyway,
I'm thinking just in
Yeah.
some cases, if it's that large, it may be more appropriate that it looks like a home. And that's where it's hard, it's defining the size
Yeah.
and the materials.
Well,
well, yeah,
I've had comments, several, and I know some members of the city council have too, aren't there zoning rules against this thing, you know, whether it's a, you know, a red barn or a metal building, you know, they have a use, and oftentimes they do combine, 2 lots into one in order to make that happen. So that's why I think that it's something to discuss, but I agree, I mean, I agree with both sides.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think the other side,
There should be some restriction, but what is it? And I don't know.
well, if you have a good sized lot, and right now our code would be, it can't be taller than the house, you know, those kind of things like that.
If you put these
If
changes.
these
Yeah,
changes go,
Yeah,
right,
you know, you look at that and, it's almost, I bet there's more. There's a few situations where there's something big red barn, metal building. I don't know that those would be approved per se now. You know, that kind of thing. And the other side of it is how is the city ever gonna enforce it? You know,
Well,
unless you get into such code that it must match the exterior of the house, then, and they're having to get a building permit or something like that, but, I don't know. You know, it's pool houses, all that kind of stuff like that. I don't know. I'd rather get input from the public about it.
how do we word something in there that allows us to have that discussion? I don't think we can have that discussion with just this, general appearance in residential districts.
Well,
One thing to maybe think about, Michael was kind of going towards that direction a little bit, that's what made me think about it. We have hundreds of accessory buildings in the city. We have complaints about the looks of about 4.
yeah, that's
So,
very true.
now that's not to say that some neighbors might not look at their neighbor's building and think, gosh, I don't like that thing. But as far as them, as far as them coming and complaining to us wholeheartedly, there's about 4 different buildings, 2 really, that we hear about more than the
Yeah.
others, but we haven't had a lot of complaints about the looks of accessory buildings.
So I would just throw it out there in general, through this discussion, all of the pros versus cons. I think I would strike 4. I don't think we need to regulate the general appearance of small accessory buildings.
Okay, if we strike this out, then there will be no discussion about that in a hearing.
Do we leave discussion point as we recommend it for a hearing, and does that,
I can leave it in there, but I can strike it, but I can still, but you'll see that, so I won't take 4 out. I'll just put a strike
Strike
through
through it.
4, so that people could, if people were
Yeah.
looking at it in the public hearing, they could say, well, why did you take that out?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I
Okay,
think that's a
yeah,
good idea.
I like that,
I think 5 is more critical than the addressing the appearance and stuff
yeah.
of how close, just for variety of reasons of that, but yeah, I like that idea. And let some feedback come. My other option, my other thought was to put general appearance in residential districts of accessory buildings will be no restrictions at all. And then the public will probably come in and really have a lot to tell us. So.
Well, we want to hear
But-
from the public.
And rather, instead of having a mob come after us, it would probably be better that we line through it. And then if they want, they can say, well, why did we take that out? What does that mean could happen? So anyway. Leave it to your discretion, sir.
Oh,
sorry.
yes.
Loretta Buckley. So on this line, we moved here from Virginia, we had 3 acres, so we had quite a bit of land. And we were able to put a barn, I put a barn, a riding arena, other sheds and stuff. Our requirements were that they were built the same and looked the same as the home. And even when, like, the roofs had to have the same roofing. So I had a horse barn, Dutch gambrel. It had a shingled roof. It had the siding, everything. It looked just like my house. Wasn't bigger than it, so I agree with height and size. Even my running sheds had shingled roofs. Everything was wood. Everything was siding. Was a lot more expense for me to do it, but I'll tell you what, my property was gorgeous. We built an exterior garage for all of my toys, my ATV and all of that. I mean, it was still the same. It was the same siding, it had the windows, it had the shingled roof, it had everything that matched the house. And I know in our neighborhood, at least, you know, those that did, they were beautiful buildings. And I don't know if we can find a way.
Was that CCNRs or was that city code?
Well, it was CCNRs,
Yeah.
but you know, the code. Our CCNRs had to follow the code, and then they had other things like the beauty, right, to maintain the value of our homes.
Yeah.
So it was really something that followed code as far as like height and size that we've been discussing. But
It
I
would be
can't,
interesting. I think most of the stuff like that you see in CCNRs. it isn't the state code that everybody is forced to do this. In certain communities and developments, they'll use, through the utilization, they can be more restrictive in the CCNRs than the code can be.
Right, and I do agree with you that if you put out there and said nothing and just took it all out, that suddenly everybody would be going, yeah, I've been looking at my neighbors.
But they don't look in their own backyard.
And
Yes.
you're correct, they don't, and like, how many vehicles do they have out there that, you know, there's some parts in them that might be good, but I'll put into something else.
Yeah,
I mean, we see a lot of that too, it's that the old mentality of why we love Providence, I think.
yeah,
The issue is the public may not come at the hearing or the adoption, but the first application that doesn't fit, and after, 2 years down the road after it's adopted and says, oh, hey, now I want to apply for that code, and the public's like, wait, what are you allowing this for? And it's like, well, we had a public hearing, we had the change of the rules. It'll be 2 years down the road when, because at this point, it doesn't affect them. They may not show up, they may not be there, but the minute that comes
yeah.
and, you know, I hope that you all serve your full time and have
We're
a
out
free-
by
And aren't here with it,
And
and I agree with you, yes.
it's more likely that Ty and I are gonna be here when that fire hits. So we appreciate making sure they do it as best you can now, so that it saves Ty and I the
Oh,
pain in the English later.
I agree. I think, you know, either way I don't know how you're going to address this more, but I agree with you. If you take that out, there'll be a nuclear explosion.
Yeah.
On multiple blocks, right?
It's not in there now,
Yeah.
so we're not,
We're not, but
to take it,
once you
we're
put
not,
it, yeah,
yeah.
once
So-
it's put in writing and it's, but then again, like the other things we've had, how many people watch, how many people come, you know, until they don't like something or somebody stirs up a hornet's nest, so.
So, sorry, just another question. I feel like I've read it before and it was in accessory dwelling units.
It is in there.
Yeah, cause there's a reason.
Okay, so that's coming up.
This isn't.
This
dwelling,
is just the buildings.
This is
Okay,
accessory
just
buildings,
Okay, good.
okay,
So the distance between the structures,
what has been from the distance from principal structure, which is from the house, and you have fire code as a requirement, correct?
Depends on the structure.
What type of structure?
You can have zero you can have a zero, you can have a firewall that protects. Well, the problem that we ran into, and that's why this is actually kind of coming from staff, we would like to recommend 5 feet, but, we had people that wanted to have a garage on the side of their house, but their lot wasn't big enough to meet the setbacks if it was an attached garage. Since we didn't have a thing as to how far away it could be detached, and there was nothing in the building code that says detached has to be
Right,
far away, they would put it within 6 inches of their house. So you can't tell that that's a detached structure, but then they got an extra 5 feet out of the deal.
yeah,
So if you're okay with that, then we'll live with it, but that's kind of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. If the spirit of the law is you want it to appear as a separate detached building, then you need to have probably 5 feet, because then you can get a lawnmower through it, you can not have a weed patch, because if you make them too small of a distance, then maintenance between the two becomes difficult issue. So that's kind of why we looked at 5 feet. I don't care what you do with it, but that's where it's coming from, is because we have had some people do that very thing.
Something comes up in my mind that I've seen, and it's I guess it's like a gazebo that touches the home and has a hot tub in it. So technically, it's not attached, but it touches the home, and so then they would have to push that outside.
but that falls under, it's not something that, it's not enclosed, right? It wasn't
it's a structure,
yeah,
it's not a.
structure, not a building,
Yeah, that would be in the next part, in B.
yeah.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I was reading the title, accessory buildings and structures.
So that's a little bit
Thank you.
different, But yeah,
I agree with you then. I think that a minimum of 5 feet. I mean, I think you should clearly delineate that it's separate, that it's not attached.
oh, that's interesting to me. For a lot of work I did in the past was in Logan. And, I mean, it was 16 feet. You know, part of it was inconsistent. If I had a shed, whether it was under 200 square feet or not, I had to have it at least 10 feet away from the home. Or it could be right next to the wall of the home. If it was right up against the house, it was okay. If I had it anywhere else, it had to be at least 10 feet away, which didn't make any sense to me because it was, if the shed catches on fire, you don't want it to burn the house down. Well, then why are you letting me put it right next to the house? Anyway, some of it did, but, I don't know. What does everybody's thought? What did Brian think about it?
Yeah, what have you guys discussed?
He's got a lot of
previously?
buildings and things.
He does,
That's why it's here, discussion.
yeah.
They couldn't, they
Let
couldn't,
somebody else make a decision.
they couldn't exactly agree.
My personal preference is, you know, I'd like to have a shed that's just, I push it right up next to the house,
Really?
you know?
Maybe if we did that, then maybe what we ought to say is if it's going to be
Side,
less than 5 feet from the house,
Then it needs
Then
to be,
then you have to make the primary structure setback, because then you wouldn't have somebody that would build their house and not build the garage at this point, because they know they can't fit it on their lot
Yeah,
if it's attached. So then they come and they build a detached garage right next to the house, and then they get to build it only 5 feet off the property line.
right,
And then we have people that say, how did they get to do that? I thought it was 10 feet. And it's-
right.
Then we say, well, it's technically detached, and so they could. So that's the battle that we face.
And
I
there's
agree.
places like that. I was at one house, it's an older home, but the garage is detached, but the slope of it is almost touching the house. And it's like a foot off of the property line, maybe 2 at the most. But,
Yeah, I think there needs to be something, but not everything.
so we could also when we get to this area here, we could say that, you know, the accessory building small, which is under 200 square feet,
you know,
can be up against the.
could be anywhere.
Could
It's
be-
almost like Brian said, if it's under 200 square feet,
Yeah, it's-
it doesn't really matter. Right?
Right.
And I'm
Yeah.
reading ahead, I'm sorry, because the definitions are, you know,
Yeah.
they're fine margins here, but as I was just speaking about accessory structures, it does specify 5 feet from the principal structure.
right,
But I could see that as being more likely to be right above the house, or right at, you know.
accessory structure or a shed. An
Well, like
accessory
when I
building.
asked about like a gazebo or a pagoda or you know,
That's an accessory structure.
right. So does it make sense for those two things to be the same?
No, I don't think it needs to be the same. I don't think it ought to be the same.
Tell me the difference that you see there.
Well, if we have a garage or, you know, something that's larger than 200 square feet, then we ought to have 5 feet distance. We ought to have some distance.
Mhm.
But if you've got an accessory building small, which is under 200 square feet, you know, you ought to be able to put it someplace that's just kind of out of the way, because it's just gonna take up more space that you can't use if you can't put it
What if it
next to
was
a building.
something like, defining permanent structure versus a temporary structure? For instance, my doghouse by my stairs probably is, well, it is right next to my house. It's under 200 square feet, but it isn't a permanent structure. It doesn't have a foundation on it.
Right,
But if I build the
I like
gazebo
that.
with a permanent structure, there's a difference.
right.
And if that shed, that you say, hey, this is a tough shed, but it's portable, it's movable.
Right.
That may be different than if you put a foundation on it and you say, oh, I'm putting
I
a
built it
foundation on
the
this and
foundation.
it now it's permanent. I don't know, anyway, just
I think that's a
tossing
great
that out
idea.
of a thought of
I think
But
that's a great
maybe,
idea too.
maybe between what you're talking about, maybe there is some permanency that should be discussed that, because if it's less than 5 feet, maybe it shouldn't be permanently there, cause now you have a foundation and.
Then you defer building permit and you're adding on to your home
Right.
essentially.
What if I have
Well, it does say accessory structures that require a building permit.
permit?
Oh, there we go.
Must
So
be
that's
5
over
feet
200
from
square
the
feet
principal
anyway.
structure.
Right,
Yeah,
It's not talking about the little ones.
the tough shed.
So at that point, that is talking about the over 200 square feet, cause
Mhm.
that's when the building permit hits.
yes.
Right,
So-
Yeah,
When you're but when you're talking those other ones and what you're doing, and whether they can be there,
yeah,
So if I wanna enclose the patio right off the house, how is that gonna be treated? Let's say I have a 20 by
that's,
30
that's an
patio,
extension of the house.
so it's different, it's not gonna have
It's
the
gonna
5 foot,
It's gonna have if you're enclosing the patio
yeah,
right off of the house, and it's actually attached to the house, or you're
Right.
extending the roof.
no, it kinda like a glass covering or whatever, something like that, the indoor outdoor
Sunroom.
patio sunroom type thing.
that may
But I'm just-
encroach into your setbacks depending on how the patio is.
Mhm,
Cause now it's gone from
If it-
flat to
Yeah,
a structure,
right.
Yeah.
you might have other things.
So then it becomes a principal, generally, it becomes part of the principal structure. Cause generally, you have to anchor them to the house to provide the stability
Yeah.
that you
yeah, you're gonna anchor it to the house,
need.
And-
And when
and
you
then,
anchor to the house,
it's gonna be on the patio, secured to the patio.
yeah.
Okay, so that's something that's dealt with from the house standpoint, not a building. So I like Ryan's comment about, when we're talking about the distance, is it a permanent structure? Distance from principal structure for a permanent
And if it's
accessory
two
building?
hundred square feet, it's probably gonna be permanent, cause it requires a building permit, so.
Yeah.
You're probably talking that, so.
So I think just more specifically 10, 12, 2A5 is where we would wanna put that, the distance from the principal structure or accessory buildings.
For accessory buildings,
Can you make note of that?
Just mimic the
permanent-
same thing, we can just put the same
Accessory
thing
buildings
that we
required.
had in B1, we can just
Yeah.
put that in B5. And instead of saying accessory structure, we can say accessory buildings.
And
keeping
so
it-
that would account for anything that requires a foundation
That would account.
permanency.
A building
permit.
permit.
Okay.
Typically, if you get a building permit, it could be foundation, but it does, not all the time.
Okay. But you wouldn't need a building permit for a tuck shed or a.
If it's under 200 square feet, you know.
200 square feet
It's
is
just portable on the ground, no electricity and no water, right?
Yeah, cause when you start putting plumbing
Plumbing and
and
electricity.
electricity, they become more permanent.
And those are also inspection, building inspection, so
Mhm.
not just the 200 square feet, but if you have electricity, then that's another building inspection requirement.
Yeah. Okay, good. Accessory structures, are we ready to go on to accessory structures?
Yes.
Okay. So the accessory structure doesn't protect you from the elements. So it can be a tennis court, it can be fire pit, whatever, spas, hot tubs. Pool screening, decks, waterfalls, fountains, barbecue pits. Is there anything that we need to discuss on this? That's, this is new, but we've seen this before in the, when they were separate, right?
Mhm.
I think we added the tennis courts, sports courts, batting cages, that type of thing, number 5, right?
Right. And the graphic that's on page 205, that graphic will change. I haven't had Justin do it yet since we haven't decided this, but once we decide this, then I'll have Justin change that graphic to meet whatever we decide, but this is just a graphic that's kind of a placeholder
Right.
to start your discussion on it.
Yeah. So if we're good to go to 205 then?
Yes. Yes.
I had just a couple of comments on B. Portions of the enclosure may be located within the rear and or side yard. I just wanted to add yard area because it was a little bit confusing, the side area of the lot. So side yard, and all these are labeled, front yard, side
Right.
yard, rear yard. So that's good too. The other thing is on, row 51, setback area or the clear view areas, or we're calling that clear view area, not clear vision area, so I just thought we ought to change that, so it's common. And discussion point. I think this had to do with the
The clear view.
clear view, I think, is that right, Scarlett?
And I think we have discussed it.
We discussed that, and put that to
So,
bed last.
It also had to do with, so if you have if you have a batting cage or you have a tennis court and you've got a chain link fence around it, not a solid fence, a chain link fence, so there's nothing, street side wise that's blocking you wouldn't want it down in the clear view area, definitely. But are you okay to have it in the street side yard setback or the front yards? It says it shall not be located in the front yard or a street yard side, or excuse me, a side yard street setback. So if you look at this little diagram down here, that light green area, not the dark green, that's the clear
yard.
view. The dark green triangle, that's the clear view, that's not part of what we're talking about right now, because we don't want to put anything in there, even if
Front
it's
yard.
see-through. But would you have any objection on whichever one you decide is so let's say the front yard is the one on the north, the top front yard, and the street, our code doesn't call it a front yard on the street side, we'd call that the side yard comma street. So let's say the side yard comma street is on the left side of the little brown house. Would you allow a tennis court to lap over from the rear yard, the dark green rear yard, into the light green street comma, or side yard comma street? Would you allow that dark green and would you allow that tennis court, pickleball court or whatever to lap over into that street side yard? That's what we're kind of trying to find out.
The reason this is like this is because it's a corner lot.
Mm-hmm.
I would personally think that we should allow that rear yard to continue on over to the side. On the sidewalk there. Is that sidewalk or is that,
The gray is the sidewalk, and then where the trees are is the park strip.
Park Strip? Okay, yeah.
But that's kind of the question that it's at. Right now, it's saying that they can't. So you
Right.
you'd have to put pickleball court if you could put it right behind your house, or you could put it you could put it in the side yard and the dark green area of the right side of the house, the interior side there. But you couldn't extend it out into the street, the side yard street on the left side of the house. And I'm okay with whatever you decide. I just want to make sure you know what we're telling them they can't do. We have had people with corner lots feel like they're being jeopardized because even though they're not obstructing any view. And the other thing of it is you can put a 6-foot fence
Right.
on that street side.
Yeah.
That can be a privacy fence, as long as you don't
Block that
go into
triangle.
that triangle.
Yeah,
So that's,
yeah.
that's my question as to, how do you wanna treat
I would
these
extend
other
that
things?
dark green, all the way along over to the sidewalk.
So you would allow them to be you would look at it more that they could be built just so long as they stayed out of the clear view, they could go into the street side.
Yeah. I would think that'd be okay. I mean, you buy a corner lot, cause it's usually a bigger lot and stuff, and then there are so many restrictions, you can't use, 60% of your yard.
That's true.
I
Yeah.
almost, as I'm looking at this picture, yeah, I mean, I think I agree, there should be rear yard, and there almost should be another side yard as well. So I would say the front yard is where the home faces,
The street is.
and then they should have another side yard and a rear yard.
That the rear yard go all the way over to the sidewalk and
Yeah.
side yard just the same as it is on the right.
Front yard is the yard that
The front of the
has
house.
your
is
address.
the street.
Yeah.
whatever.
Do you see problems with that, Scarlett?
Well, that's why this graphic isn't correct. If you notice the note that talks about it, it says the city code uses term front yard and street yard or side yard comma street instead of two front yards. So that's why I said in our code, if this was gonna match our code, instead of it saying front yard on the left side of the little brown house, that would say side yard comma street.
Okay.
So it gives them that whole light green area from the front corner of the house to the back property line. That gives them the whole light green area is this side yard street. And then we have the other side yard for us would say side yard interior. So,
I'm gonna go back and read what we're limited to. I mean, so what are the limitations of side yard street?
so right now we're saying that the enclosure shall not be located in the front, the side yard street setback areas, or the clear view area. So my question is, do you wanna let them go into the side yard street area?
I would, because they could put a 6-foot fence, solid fence, right along the sidewalk there on that side yard street. You know? Is my thoughts.
Okay,
I think I agree. We're trying to make this code less restrictive.
Yeah, I think so. All right, so if we, are we good with that? Move on?
Extending the rear yard, perpendicular or parallel to
Parallel to the
the
back.
rear of the home.
Yeah,
okay, I'll have Justin do a new graphic then with that in mind, and then I'll change that wording.
okay. Internal accessory dwelling units, used to be called accessory apartment units.
I like the name change.
I do too, yeah. So again, it's only an internal accessory dwelling unit if we're renting it. So an internal accessory unit, will be allowed in a single family residential zones, provided the following conditions are complied with. So the first one here, we need to have some discussion, so the number allowed. Do we, okay, so number allowed, a maximum of one IADU or ADU shall be allowed on each property associated with single family dwelling unit. So the question is, should that be one IADU and or an ADU? In other words, can you rent part of your basement, and can you also build and a detached accessory dwelling unit.
I think you have one or the other. Myself personally, otherwise, you're gonna have somebody living in the house, you're gonna have somebody living downstairs in the IADU. Then you'd have somebody living in the detached ADU. So now you've got
Your whole
2, 4,
mortgage paid
6,
for by
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
else.
yeah.
Parking,
Yeah.
that makes me think about parking.
Yeah,
And you can have
parking.
up to 4 unrelated individuals per unit.
So if
Per
I was
unit, yes.
if I was a single person and I owned the house and I lived there, then I could have 3 roommates in the top, if I lived in the top.
Yeah.
And I could rent the bottom and there could be 4 roommates there. Or you could rent it to a family and there could be 6 or 8 people because they're all related.
Right.
And then you could have the detached accessory dwelling, which would have the same thing. You could either have 4 unrelated, or you could have a family that we
Yeah.
don't cap the number on a family.
Because we've said the ADU can be as big, as large as 1,200 square feet, isn't it?
Right.
So you could have 14, 15, 20 people there.
Do we have limits in this code about parking?
Yes, we address parking later.
Okay, jumping ahead again.
So that's what I think most, every place, everywhere else I've been is that they limit it to one
One or the other,
or the other.
not one of each.
Yeah,
That's that would be my recommendation, but it's
Yeah.
totally up to you guys.
So,
I would say, let's see, a maximum of 1 IADU or ADU allowed on each property associated with a single family dwelling unit. Period. It's one or the other.
okay, Shelley?
Okay, I can see both sides again. I'm just, my own home, I could finish the basement, it could be, and I have room for for like a nice little accessory dwelling unit for my mother-in-law, and my kids are in the basement, and we're all happy together
Oh,
and.
you're all family, so
They're not paying.
they're not paying.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at that point, you can have both of those.
Yeah.
You just can't
And not
charge
even
for
have
both of those.
Okay, okay.
You can
Yeah,
only
I
charge
think
for
I
one.
agree. I
yeah.
don't think we
Yeah.
want, we want that much traffic and.
Because investors that are looking for rental property, that's a way for them to do it.
But they have to have, property owner has
You
to
gotta
live in
live-
one of the units.
Yeah.
On the.
Yeah, and Every rule you come up with, they'll find a way to get around it.
They will.
It's
Yeah.
like, we're
I just
gonna,
bought it for my daughter to live in
Yes,
the basement and
I
have.
put her name on I have one right now in Hiram. She's gonna live in the ADU. We're renting the house out for 4 people upstairs, and we have the basement, we got 4 people down there. And I'm gonna have a couple other roommates join me in my house here in the backyard, my ADU.
That's my retirement.
But Hiram doesn't have
I just
anything that
hope you have
says
a
it's one or
parking
the other.
space for all.
Oh, yeah, it's all gravel. The lot is really huge, so.
I hope you're not my neighbor.
So we,
I'm gonna put the barn in the back and paint it purple.
so we'd like to keep that, like it is, or, not and or.
Well,
Yeah, I
yeah, it
think
doesn't
so.
say and or, does it?
No,
No,
but
that's just
that's
one
the discussion
option.
point.
Yeah,
Do we
my
want
personal
that?
is, I think we don't wanna
We don't
We don't
wanna
wanna
make a
create something
residential,
where
single family.
a family neighborhood turn into a rental complex, you know,
Okay.
myself
Yeah, I
personally.
agree.
But I also could see Shelley's thing of, you know, my kids are older kids are downstairs, you have someone that gets married, they're starting down there. And you have an ADU in the back for your, but as long as she's not renting,
They're
she
all-
Yeah,
can
they
do
probably
that.
want me to pay for it. And
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
right.
it'd be expensive.
So that's a real good part, that is
Yeah.
different, that you could have those things.
We're just looking out for your kids, so you can't charge them rent.
Yes. Yeah.
You
Okay,
can charge the mother-in-law rent, just not the kids.
we gotta keep moving along here.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we do. So
So
yeah, I think that's it, because we
there are
didn't,
no discussion or points unless you want to talk about any of this other that, and hopefully you've been able to
Yeah.
read through it and see if there's anything. We are encouraging people to, sign, to say, hey, hold up your hand and say, I have an ADU.
It's
Mhm.
interesting in Nibley, they've done away with that requirement.
What?
To report it?
No, the requirement that either the house or the ADU must be occupied by the owner. You can rent the house and you can rent the ADU.
Really?
What's happened?
They
That's
must have recently done it.
Mayor Jacobson said that they had recently done that. When I was at their last city council meeting, they said they did that it's not a requirement anymore.
Well, I think.
I'm
Wow,
sure
that-
you're allowed to.
That automatically turns a
owner-occupied,
house
then-
into a duplex.
Yeah,
Yeah,
In
yeah.
essence, yeah. So they're promoting the idea of the ADUs, but anyway,
well, we're not.
yeah, I don't see that. I think you have.
Well,
We just want
Yeah,
the.
we want
yes,
somebody-
we are promoting
We
it.
want
but
a responsible adult
want-
living in the
We
property.
want the owner responsible for what's happening there. I think that's very critical.
I-
Otherwise, you're gonna turn, the potential is there for nice neighborhoods to turn into a bad neighborhood, in my opinion.
That might happen anyway, though. I mean, the state really may make us allow duplexes in single family homes. They didn't this year, they
Yeah.
threatened, but they didn't.
Yeah,
But hopefully what we are doing here and things like that to
Yeah.
try and make it easier for people.
yeah,
But
And-
I kind of still think an owner ought to live on the property.
in one of the two.
Yeah,
And, but say they'll get around it. It's like,
Yes.
it's gonna
they
be
will.
in my child's name. And I have a quick claim deed in mind that the minute he goes to finance it, I'm taking it back. But anyway, so, not my children. My children are already cutting me out of the wheels. So anyway, okay, I think all that looked great.
Okay.
What else you got, Bob?
let's go on to, the next page. There are no discussion points here.
Yeah,
That is though where we tell you about the parking. We refer you to another section of the code that talks about if you have more than so many people in a house, you have to have an extra space and all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Right. That's, number 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Requesting legalization, that's something we've altered. Some because it, talked about,
oh, that they
The-
need to register.
register within a certain period of time, which is passed and that type of
Yeah,
thing, so.
requirements, yeah, okay,
Okay, so I don't see anything else we need to discuss on that, except we go down to detached accessory dwelling units. So now we're talking about the, separate building for accessory dwelling units. And, there's nothing on that page for us to talk about. Now we're on page 4 of 5.
and there's the
Yeah.
172.
We go down to line 172, we have a discussion point, maximum of 1 IUD, this is the same thing.
Yeah,
yeah, we just wanted to be consistent.
Yeah.
Consistent, so, yeah,
I really
Shelley,
like
you
the
think the
addition
same
of 2A, just wanted to point that out. I think encouraging them, it is,
We all,
oh, yeah.
we'll put that in the newsletter.
if it gets adopted, we certainly will.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I like the idea that we make it the same, stay consistent of just the one or the other.
now, I did add one comment here on the line 165. For the purpose of existing accessory dwelling unit that meets, requirements of ADU but has not been used as one. The owner shall execute a deed restriction listed above prior to use as
That's an ADU.
Okay,
So I think we were just saying if there's something on the property already,
yeah, if they're
Like
not
they need
using
to-
it as an ADU,
but if they go to
want
start to
then
rent it,
prior to use, they need to
okay,
do the deed restriction.
that's
Then
part of
it talks about the size of the unit, there in 177, 179, but that's not new information. Next page, 505, we've got a discussion point on row 184. An ADU is a single unit or combination with a group of accessory buildings of any kind is allowed. Total footprint of all accessory buildings is limited to 25% of the lot area not covered by the principal residence. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Increase, discussion point, increase is available. Oh, it increases the available space to build an accessory building of any kind.
An accessory building, an accessory dwelling unit,
Yeah.
an accessory
So
structure.
so this would be a combination of accessory dwelling unit and accessory buildings. All your buildings can come to 25% of your lot that is not occupied by the house.
And before it was broken up by yard,
Right.
so it limited you 25% of
Yeah.
each yard. This way, you take your lot footprint out and what is left, 25% of
That
that
is what
you can use with a combination of buildings.
Okay.
Right.
Taking into account the setbacks.
Yeah,
No. Well,
the setbacks are part of the yard. That's why
Yeah,
it's important to explain.
Okay.
Yeah,
the lot, we're not,
they can't put them on top of the setback, but they can use that space as part of the
As part of the
percentage
yard.
calculation.
yeah, part of percentage calculation. So any issues with that?
no,
No,
Okay. Next discussion point is on row 198.
Yeah.
The section is, an ADU shall be compatible design. Okay,
that's the primary dwelling unit.
as the primary dwelling unit. So
Yeah.
now we're back to controlling design to a certain extent, right? But this is for another living unit,
Right.
not for, a barn.
That's
so
what
it's hard
almost,
because they can be the same size. You can have
Well-
a huge barn and a huge accessory dwelling unit.
No, your accessory dwelling unit is limited to 1,200 square feet
Mhm.
Or 50% of the
or 50% of the
primary structure, so
primary.
whichever is smaller. So if you had a 2,000 square foot primary home,
You can
you're-
build 1,000 square foot
ADU,
ADU.
And a 4,000 square foot barn.
Barn.
yeah.
And which one should look like the home, the bigger one or the smaller
You
one?
can have your ADU inside your barn.
Right,
You
And
can,
then should it
if
look
this
like that?
passes, you can.
Yeah.
almost
Wait a
all
minute.
the other jurisdictions have the statement or in the code, the requirement that the ADU exterior match the exterior of the home. They don't want a beach house in the back, or a log cabin or things like that. Almost everywhere from
It looks
Richmond.
the
So
same.
those little box homes,
Yeah, but see, you can put whatever facade you want on those.
so it does match.
Yeah, I mean, it can be painted, it can be paneled, it can be rock, stone, all that kind of stuff. And we support that. But that's been pretty much all through the valley, the requirement.
And then, but this makes me wanna go back to the accessory buildings, and what I would suggest
But
is,
you want my shop to look like I have to make my
Oh, my
shop look
chicken
like my
coop.
house.
depending on the size.
You want me chicken
If
coop to look
it's
like the house?
over 25% of the size of the home, 75%, then it should look like the home. So a little greenhouse is fine, a little, trellis is fine. But a barn should fit in.
but if you're living in an area that they like barns to look like barns and
Yeah.
houses to look like houses,
Yeah.
shouldn't that be more of a neighborhood? More of a CCNR
And that's
thing?
where I think maybe it's a size or a zoning, depending on the size of the
On the-
lot.
Make it the intended use of the property. If everybody around is a residential home, then you kind of need to make it look like a residential home, but if you've got neighbors that have barns and animals and the
Mhm.
use is, different, then do it differently, but. I mean, that's where we need the public to weigh in. I think.
Yeah, like we've
But
said
I do
before,
think, I personally think there's a difference between an accessory dwelling unit
right?
Yes.
and the look of an accessory dwelling unit than the
The barn,
barn.
because
Or an
somebody is
accessory-
living
Because it's
there.
like it's an
Yeah,
extension of the house in a sense, even though it's detached. Well, and even up in Richmond as an example, it can't be detached, but we can detach it if we have a, walkway, an enclosed walkway from the house.
Well, technically, if it's enclosed walkway and it's attached to the house and it's attached to the unit, it's all
part of the
house.
house.
Yeah,
Okay.
so anyway, that was how it was approved for up there.
Yeah.
But everybody looks at it as, here's our house, and yes, this is a grandmother quarters, or, you know, whatever it is, for whoever it is, an adult child or whatever. They are looking for it to match, partly so that the community doesn't, that there's not outcry that, you know, this is
Yeah.
painted.
So this says the ADU has to be a compatible design. It took out all of the other stuff. It just says it has to be a compatible design of the primary dwelling. Probably said, if we took out all that other stuff, it probably
Which means
says,
the neighbors can't complain.
yeah,
Right.
If the
Because it
neighbors start
was-
complaining, it's not compatible.
Yeah, an ADU shall be a compatible design.
Well, shouldn't we define what the compatible is? Why was that stricken?
Compatible design and the primary dwelling should match the ADU, the exterior of the ADU should match the primary dwelling unit.
one of the reasons is because we want to encourage people to put detached ADUs back there. And if you make them too complicated,
Yeah,
again,
makes it harder and more
makes it
costly.
harder. So if the home is a really complicated design home, and you have too much, and it has to have the same architectural features,
Yeah,
then it may make the ADU,
yeah.
Harder
the
to
cost
do.
of it. The
But-
biggest thing that most places were saying is that, appearance, if it's a white house with black shutters or something like that, and it's a shingle roof, you know, that type of matching the style, not necessarily,
The pitch of the roof and
structure
that.
and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
although you know, yeah,
So-
you-
So the reason we struck out some of this, I mean,
yeah,
it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it ought to be in keeping with the atmosphere of the house, so it looks like.
it was
fits
to match, yeah, even, yeah,
in. So
to match the-
I don't think you need to have the same pitch of roof, you know, but it ought to,
maybe instead of design of shall be compatible in appearance with the primary structure,
Actually, if there is things that you want to have, this would be the time to be specific of what that is.
right,
If it's not pitch or roof,
Yeah.
what is it that it should be?
Let me
Is
tell
it-
you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that it depends on what you can see from the street. So it's almost like a matching facade.
Yeah, almost everywhere doesn't allow them to be in the front or the side of the house, they have to be in the rear.
So they're not
And we're moving
visible.
well, we
Yeah.
just changed that,
it. Yeah,
You did change that, but
that.
it could be in the side.
cause that was
Yeah,
one of
but
our
that
biggest
was-
complaints.
I don't think, well, that's true, you
You've
did
got
because you have
houses that are-
with the property. That's the
yeah,
primary
you got
thing,
the
most of them,
property, the house in the back.
most houses don't have the room on the side with.
We just have an interesting little community that has a lot of homes that,
so
Yeah.
long and skinny, shotgun style.
Set way back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you
if
wouldn't
you
even
have
know there's
that.
a house back
Yeah.
there in some lots.
Yeah, I can see that, we talked about that with some individuals where
So it
they'd
depends
be
on
better
what-
to be in the front, but no,
Sorry,
no, you're
jumping
fine.
forward. So excited.
so if you said compatible design and facade, because if they have to be compatible building materials, and your house was made of an expensive brick, then
Yeah,
you couldn't.
you don't want
You
that.
don't wanna have to make the ADU have an expensive brick,
Yeah,
but they got some really nice looking imitation
right,
brick
Yeah,
siding things
yeah.
that would
yeah,
make it look the same.
yeah,
But they only had to do the front visible
yeah, but the
side.
front.
Yeah,
And
front of
the house was made out of expensive brick on all four sides, but you just had to match for the front side. That might make it more
right.
palatable, I mean, and it might not be expensive, but compatible
Yeah,
to that
We could
facade.
say
or-
street view, compatible to the street view of the home.
of the existing home.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, and just so you know, we put some of that, styrofoam stone stuff on the front of the model one we did. It was just as expensive as if we had bought the real stone and had that put on. We
I
did
thought
it the
that
other
was
way.
One of their selling features, but
Yeah.
oh well.
It's great, yeah, it was unbelievable. For that little bit we did in the front, 20 feet,
Okay,
probably
so-
17 feet.
So if you want it.
No, I'm
you
not
want it
even
to say-
thinking compatible to the street view of the primary residence, compatible to the street view, so, you know, a corner lot, you want the sides to match and the fronts to match, but if it's in the back, it
Everybody's
doesn't
gonna
really
see it, yeah.
matter. And if it's just on the side, and all you can see is the front, then that's what should match. Right, I mean, it's just cohesive.
Match to the
Facade.
primary building. Now, I thought you were headed off to match the surrounding street view from others, and I'm like, ooh, well, that might
Where's she
be.
going with
That
that?
would be difficult.
That was the case. I don't know how you match to the neighbor.
I think matching to the street view of the primary building,
Yeah, okay, right, cause it could be the,
we could
But
say,
if you say,
we could say
Just get a
the
mirror.
street view of the ADU should be compatible in design and features with the street view of the primary dwelling unit.
yeah,
That way, we're talking about the street view of the ADU, so if the ADU is in a street corner, on a street side corner, and the front yard, and you can see it for both, then they gotta be compatible with the side but that means if the side of the house is straight siding, then the side of the ADU could be straight siding, because it's compatible with the house, so is that what you're okay with?
yeah, and it's also defining compatible, right? What does that mean exactly? Who decides that?
We as staff.
Substantially
probably try to-
similar architectural features,
shall be comparable in design and,
colors,
Yeah.
design, I mean.
Shall
maybe
be-
just leave it the way it was, the,
But just add street view to it, because that's what you're worried
an
about.
ADU shall be.
So if it's an ADU in the back corner that you can't see it from
Yeah.
the street,
Yeah,
then you're not as worried about
right,
it being compatible. But if it's visible from the street, you want it to be compatible.
yeah,
yeah,
so you're basically two different things. If it
So
can
if
be
we're talking street view,
Yeah, if the ADU is present in the street view, then it must match be compatible to the street view of a primary resident.
so I can rewrite that with street
Yeah.
view and see what you think when I
Okay.
rewrite it.
Yeah,
That
Yeah.
sounds
Okay.
good.
okay, okay. Off-street parking is a requirement. Discussion point on, 206 to 208. ADU may utilize the existing utilities, city supplied culinary water, sanitary sewer, principal dwelling. An ADU that requires separate utility hookups will be subject to metering and city connection fees.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why we needed to discuss that, because that sounds like a pretty reasonable thing to do. You gotta have a separate meter, you gotta pay the fees to do all that.
Well, and they can do, like, some individuals where they're using them as rental units, you can get third-party metering. So you don't have to, it's almost like if you go to the city and say, I have this lot, I wanna put a separate meter and do they have to pay impact fees because there's all that that
Well,
infrastructure tied
it
into it?
depends where the separate meter, if you're doing third-party
Yeah,
separate
see,
metering,
that's totally different,
that's totally
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
We're gonna meter what goes through our meter.
right?
And then, so what goes through our meter
Yeah.
into the main house and into the ADU,
Right.
we're gonna meter with our meter. If the property owner wants to contact Next Meters and get one of those meters that's going to meter
Right,
from the house
to
to the ADU, that's their,
yeah,
that's
that's
between
what we,
them.
yeah, that's what we
But that's not,
recommend.
but we
Yeah.
wouldn't,
Yeah,
we wouldn't charge them anything for
Yeah.
that because they've gotta go do that
right.
with that private third party.
But if I said I want my own separate electrical pedestal, and I want my own separate connection, I could see impact fees.
Absolutely.
Would just be like any other thing, but nobody's looking at that, it's just adding cost. Most people aren't going to, if it's for family, things like that, and most of even the rental things, they're not, but if it's an issue, that's what we recommend that they do. Cause you can do it for the water and the electricity, so,
So are you okay with the way this reads?
Yeah, I am.
Yes.
yes, I think you did a great job there.
Screening. The orientation of proposed ADU shall, to the maximum extent practical, maintain the privacy of residents in adjoining dwellings as determined by the physical characteristics surrounding the ADU, including landscape, screening, fencing, and window or door placement.
What do you mean by screening? You want it hidden from your neighbors?
Well, this is between the primary residence and the ADU.
The orientation of the proposed ADU shall,
No, this
it's
is
which way you're positioning it.
of residents in
Residents
adjoining
in
dwelling.
adjoining dwellings, not, is that not the primary residence in the ADU, that's,
That's the neighbors.
the neighbors.
Yeah, so you're gonna make them, if they wanna put an accessory building, have to hide it from the neighbors?
Not an accessory building.
Yeah, but why not?
Accessory,
If you're gonna make me for my ADU bear that expense,
This is somebody living there though.
nobody's living there.
yes,
You should have maybe some ability to have privacy of where you live.
so are you saying privacy for me living there in the
The
ADU?
person living in it.
The person living there,
Or, yeah, I mean, either way, I mean, you're having
Yeah.
people living in either side, so.
well, what I'm
You
saying
want
is, if
privacy
you,
on both, right?
well, everybody would like that. Perfect example is our house, the people on the back of our houses, those houses sit up higher. I mean-
Right down on you.
They can walk it, look in their living room, look down and see everything going on in our backyard.
Watch TV at your house.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
can they look into your bedroom?
yes,
You don't close the
yeah,
curtain.
there is one, yeah. I like to run around just in my
Please,
shorts.
this is recorded and,
Hey, well, they're the neighbors, they already see it. Okay,
This
so,
says to the maximum extent practical, so, which is kind of hard to determine, but
yeah,
I don't think it's unrealistic to say to somebody,
Think
if you're
about
gonna
that.
put if
It's
you're
it that
gonna
I-
put an ADU in your backyard, maybe you should have a privacy fence around your yard.
So you're not peeking into the neighbors.
or design it so that it's not directly over your neighbor's bedroom or bathroom and.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that it's designed
Well-
to,
yeah.
you wanna at least have some consideration for your.
It's interesting because we have that house where it's an accessory building, two-story accessory building. And the neighbors on both sides, they look out their window and that's all they see is the wall. The wall to that thing, the two-story
They
wall.
love you.
No, well, and they used to be able to look at the mountains this way and this way and this way. Now, if you look this way, or if they're out on their if they're on their patio, now they put up a blind thing because they don't wanna just see the back of the side of a building. So, and they had a fence, the fence I'm sure will go back up, but the house is tall, twice as tall as the fence. So,
But is the ADU people, are the people in the ADU, are they able to look into the neighbor's yard?
well,
Cause the neighbors still have privacy. We're not trying to block them we're not trying to
Yeah.
protect any views.
Yeah.
We're just trying to protect privacy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with what you're saying. And I think, doesn't this say it's a one-story? Or did we say?
No, we took that out.
We took it out?
Yeah.
I thought I saw something of it. So anyway, does the ADU have windows? Absolutely. But if people have, if, like we do, we have a 6-foot fence in the backyard, people could still look in at it, could still look into the house. Just like they can look to our house. So if it didn't have, if it didn't have a fence around it, if the lot didn't have an fence, then I agree with you. I think it should be, because you're going to, one house that we're looking at is to put it in the back corner away from the primary structure a little bit on that lot.
It's a bit squishy because it says as to practical,
Mhm.
to extent practical. I think it's asking you to be respectful.
So
So too.
not have it where the front door is staring into the back of a neighbor's house. Something like that.
If possible.
Yeah.
Maybe
most of
offset the
them-
windows. I mean,
Huh?
you could offset the windows so the windows weren't directly looking right
Yeah.
into it. You could offset.
Well, most of it
Offset
would
the
be,
building
most
and-
of them would be facing towards the back of the primary house is the way almost all of them have been laid out, but, and so you have windows on the two sides, which basically look into the backyard, look into here, and you have one window in the front. But other ADUs, especially if you build a 1,200 square foot ADU, I mean, that could be all kind of different, so it could be, I understand what you're saying, you don't want it to be where somebody can just, that somebody sitting in the ADU can stare into other people's windows. Is that what you're saying to a degree? Or or the neighbors staring in to the people in the ADU?
Either way, I mean, I think practical, I think most things will become practical. If you line it up right with the neighbor's bathroom window,
Yeah,
Then they're gonna put a curtain in there.
they probably will, but you ought to
Plant
have
a
some
tree,
respect
yeah.
that,
Or you
Well,
plant a
yeah,
tree.
or plant a tree.
it would be interesting, drive around.
Some type of screening.
Drive around our neighborhood or drive around where there are different heights. I mean, even right across the street. The gentleman where we had him cut all those trees out in the front. I mean, those lots are stair stepped. And windows on this side of this neighbor house look right into his. Whether into the kitchen area, and then there's bedrooms and a bathroom. So, I mean, there's a lot of that where the lots are stair stepped, and even with a privacy fence, all of us have them up there.
And this talks about the orientation of the house.
Yeah, I
It's-
agree with
It's
that.
asking you to set the house
yeah,
to maintain privacy for everybody.
yeah, as
If
best
you
you
can.
can,
As best you can,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I guess just part of it, let me get to an ADU. Okay,
To the
the
extent.
orientation of the proposed ADU shall to the maximum extent
Practical.
practical, maintain the privacy of residents in adjoining dwelling, which basically means residents in
Either one.
the neighbors. Residents in adjoining dwellings, whether it's the primary house, the neighbors, as determined by the physical characteristics of surrounding the ADU, including landscape screening, fencing, window and door placement. Yeah,
So plant a
Yeah.
tree. Plant some.
yeah, the neighbors could plant a tree and then they wouldn't look anymore into
If
our.
it's an issue for either and or both.
Yeah.
They can plant some trees. They can do something, do
Yeah,
some screening.
I don't like the word the maximum extent, because then you put the burden on the person doing the
To the
ADU.
extent
that I-
practical.
So
Yeah.
take out.
I would take out the
maximum.
word
Yeah,
maximum,
okay.
because then they can say, I can still see the corner of the ADU, so it says you have to do the maximum to satisfy, I would just take that word out. This is what I do, this is what we've been doing for 6 months. Most of our stuff is down in southern Utah right now, because they're vacation homes, but, that would be my suggestion for that.
Okay, that's
I'm on
good.
board with that, yeah.
Anything else? I think we've covered all the discussion points.
Yep.
I think everything else looks great. I think you guys have done a fantastic job. I like the great comments that have been made.
I think we need to look at the chart.
Oh, yeah, we need to look at the charts. Thank you. So 10.8.1 area regulations, these are multifamily and commercial mixed housing. And hopefully you've taken an opportunity to read through it. I think the only thing that, and we discussed this distance between residential structures on the same lot. We were looking at, not ADUs, but residential structures. We determined that there needs to be 5 feet between, auxiliary buildings. Do we wanna do the same?
So this is talking about.
This is ADUs now.
Right,
so-
and it's telling you that you have to look into the ADU code, and the ADU code says 15 feet, I think is what it says, or whatever it says.
So,
So are we good with that?
yeah,
With the
I think
double
when I looked
asterisk.
at all this, when I looked through it, I thought it all looked good. I didn't understand a couple of things, but
Now, one of the things, I know, the reason why I misstated, if it's an ADU, in the residential zones, in the single-family residential zones, we've got 15 feet called out. In the multifamily and commercial zones, since they don't have side yards, or the multifamily and the mixed-use zones, since their side yards depend on the height of the building, then we can't call out just 15 feet. So we just refer them to that code that says it's gonna be 20% of the height of the building, or whatever it says, I can't remember, but that's why there is a difference between calling it out 15 feet in the single-family residentials, and then a little bit different in the multifamily and the mixed use. The other thing that, Bob Washburn suggested is that instead of saying, so on setbacks,
mhm,
up right at the top, or after it gets through the minimum lot size and it hits setbacks, instead of saying principal use, to call it principal structure. That way, if it's a commercial structure, that's one thing. If it's a residential structure, that's another. So that's why, that's what he's thinking, is those principal structures. They're the setbacks for the principal structure.
right,
Um. I don't see anything else that I had issues with. Is there
Yeah.
anything you see there on the multifamily commercial stuff?
no, I thought all of that was good.
Okay, let's go into, the area regulations for agricultural and R 111, 116, or 16, all those, single family items. Again, I don't have any issues with any of these.
Yeah, I didn't see anything. Did you, Shelley?
No, I think it looks good.
So now I think we're done.
Great job, Bob. Thank you very much, you and Brian.
Yes, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, Bob and Brian did a lot of work before they came and sat and talked to Ryan and I, so.
Yeah.
It was a very good team effort.
That's great.
Thank you guys for your help.
So I would say that we are ready to, if everybody's okay, no other questions or anything to discuss, if we could make a motion to
No, that's
To
going
hold-
to public hearing.
to hold
that
the
is
public hearing is
so we
next.
schedule the public hearing.
So how about if I make a motion?
Go for it.
That-
Do we need to make the motion so that we can go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah, so I like to make a motion that on item 2, PCC amendments regarding the use and construction of the ADUs and IADUs and structures, that we accept the recommendation of staff in preparation for and hold a public hearing after we modify or update, edit the document for the comments that were made. And
Today's meetings with the findings of
the
that
findings of fact and
conclusion. of law.
conclusions of law and
And
staff
conditions.
recommendations
Yeah,
and conditions.
have a motion by Bob Washburn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I,
Okay, so we can move forward and that's probably, we're at least a couple weeks out. 2-3 weeks out for that.
Do we have enough time for their next meeting for you to post
Yeah, I could
there's 2
for the
weeks.
public hearing?
post it tomorrow, I mean, I think we're within the law.
If
Well, you
all
have to make the
Oh, yeah.
update.
Have to make updates.
If you have all the updates,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like to post it with the exhibit showing.
Then, yeah, if we need to, if it takes a little longer so that you're not rushed through with that, those kind of things, it's up to you.
Okay, if
So,
I can get it to him so he can post tomorrow, then I'll do that.
if not, we'll do it the next
Do
one.
it the next meeting.
And your illustration here is gonna go to the city council for
Yeah.
tomorrow's meeting or next week's meeting.
Before you
Sure.
adjourn, I just, I sent an email earlier to everyone that I just wanted you to look at.
Right.
It's reminding you, I forwarded Friday facts from the Utah League of Cities and Towns. I don't know if you're all on their mailing list or not. If you are, you already got the Friday facts last Friday. But if you didn't, there's a section in Friday facts about some land use training.
Right,
It's actually reviewing the changes in the legislature. And so there's 3 different ones. They're all virtual.
right.
One of them was going to be both, but they just said a thing today that said it's all virtual. So they're all virtual. So, and they're free. So if you can work them into your schedule, it'll probably be good to, go in and sign up for those virtual trainings. If you can't, do it at that time frame. I'm pretty sure they record them and you can go on and
Yeah.
look at them later, but if you can, the thing about it, you can do it when it's virtual, then you get to see the comments and stuff that people are making. And sometimes it makes a little more sense than when you go back to watch them, and then they start talking about comments that you can't see, because when they do their playback, it doesn't include comments, so.
Right.
and keep in mind, you have a certain number of required training hours.
Right.
Yeah.
If you remember how many those are,
Four.
4 hours, so you have to have 4 hours of training too.
So that'd
Well-
take 3 of them right there.
Yeah,
this week
remember to report
or
those
next
to the
week, whatever it
tie
is.
Yeah.
when you do those things.
Make sure you do your annual, public meeting.
Yeah,
The first one of them, I think, is Friday. I think the first one is this Friday, so take a look at that email and see.
I looked at it, but I can't remember for sure, but I'll look at it again. All right, with that, there's no other discussion or no other business. We will entertain a motion to close our meeting.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion from Shelley and a second from Bob Washburn. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.